Hello for all those who've joined already. Sorry for a wee slight delay at getting started. Nice to see a few people already joined in. Hopefully, microphone working fine. Hopefully, camera working fine. Hopefully, everything's working fine. It's obviously been a good week for Celtic, but quite a quiet week for Celtic. I was expecting a bit more comings and goings, a bit more definite information and guidance regarding what was happening in terms of permanent manager and so on. But that all seems to have been delayed to next week. Some comments coming in already from some of the regulars: Michael Ross, Pat McLaughlin. So Pat McLaughlin saying Maloney is chief executive officer, O'Neill director of football, Keane as manager. I would be surprised. I don't think, as with all the respect in the world to Sean Maloney, I don't think he would have the ability to be a chief executive officer. An incredible amount of financial stuff, sponsorship, legal stuff, human resources stuff. I think as bright a young man or middle-aged man as Sean Maloney is, I don't think he would have the ability to be a chief executive officer. However, director of football, I can certainly see him taking over that role, being in charge of recruitment, scouting, player development, coordinating first team academy, B team, etc., loan policy. I can see him certainly doing a very, very good job with that. I think he has been instrumental in the recovery of Celtic first time around in October, and then second time around in January onwards. I think he and Fotheringham have done a tremendous job on the training field. I don't think O'Neill is very hands-on at the moment in terms of the actual training pitches and all the routines and stuff. I think things have moved on quite a lot in the time since O'Neill was a regular first team manager. A lot of new techniques, new drills, new theories and stuff. But I can certainly see Sean Maloney moving into a director of football role. However, chief executive officer, for me, from what I understand of chief executive officers, both in football clubs and in normal business, have a tremendous amount of financial work to do, legal work, human resources, a lot of working with sponsorships, merchandising, etc. And I think that would be beyond Sean Maloney's skills. Tends to need someone from a legal background or financial background, banking background, etc. And as much as we don't like Michael Nicholson, he does actually have lots and lots of qualifications, skills, experience over 20, 30 years in law, finances, banking, and 10, 15 years working at Celtic as well. So anyway, so director of football, I can certainly see Sean Maloney taking over that role. Michael Ross, you're quite right. So you're saying Mike O'Neill quite rightly needs a few days to think things over. It certainly sounds like it's very much taken all of O'Neill's energy, physically and mentally, all the requirements of a modern day manager, head coach, an awful lot of media work, a lot more social media work that wasn't really the case in his day, regular interviews for Celtic TV, all the various different online stations, all the various different newspapers and so on, plus obviously Sky, BBC, STV, etc., as well as his other duties. So I think certainly it sounds like Celtic are behind the scenes putting together possible future managers, of which Martin O'Neill is won, and I do wonder whether the thought is that Martin O'Neill would be the first, given the first refusal as such, that he and Dermot Desmond and Michael Nicholson and Brian Wilson will all sit down next week sometime and decide whether O'Neill feels he's up to managing Celtic on a permanent basis, be it on a one-year contract, a one-year rolling contract, renewed every springtime. Michael Ross, I'd love for it to be O'Neill, but deep down, for the good of his health, he should call it a day and bow out on a high. I fully take your point. I fully understand where you're coming from. However, I do think that he has felt that taking over this job has given him a new lease of life, a new love of football. I think he was kind of saying that working with Fotheringham, McManus, Strachan, Maloney, etc., he was getting to learn a lot of new language, a lot of new training techniques, and a lot of different things that weren't really part of being a first-team manager of a big football club 20 years ago when he was managing Celtic last. Good evening to you, Lawrence6348. Lovely to have you on. Pat McLaughlin, just get Ange in. I as much as I think Ange Postecoglou was a good Celtic manager, would be a good Celtic manager. I think he also would have the ability to again bring in new methods for training, recruitment, scouting, etc. Open up different markets, etc. Yep, so Lawrence, that was one of the things I really took from his post-match interviews, both after the cup final and after the league, was how much he was enjoying it, how it was making him feel young again, and it was giving him a reason to live. I think possibly he was feeling things were a bit boring, being a pundit now and again for the BBC, TalkSport, Premier Sports, etc. And I think he really enjoyed being back involved with football players, coaches, other managers, the media, press conferences, all these things. I think it's given him a new lease of life. I think it's actually something he didn't think he was ever going to experience again. It's a wee bit like, and again, this is just an analogy to maybe show another side of things, but it's a bit like someone finding romance in a new relationship late in life, or having children late in life, or having grandchildren, all these things. A lot of folk who have had grandchildren talk about it, giving them a new lease of life, a new reason to live, a new focus for things. So not that I'm saying being a football manager is like those things, but I do think it's actually given him new interests. So it was like as I knew O'Neill would not carry on at his age, bang on a high with double that no one expected. I think completely agree. No one expected. Well, I thought actually, and there is video evidence and comment evidence that I did think Celtic were still going to win the double, even when the darkest days of early January, late December. I did still think they were going to win the double. A lot of people thought I was being overly optimistic or stupid, etc. But I had immense faith in the players, immense faith in the managers, the coaches, etc. And I did think that if Celtic's players, coaches, backroom staff, boardroom staff, and fans all got on the same page, as we did for the last 2 or 3 months, that things would all turn out fine. So Wyoming, I know Rangers don't win much, but it's annoying that they always get their transfer business done quicker than us. I think part of this at the moment, it sounds like the deal for Lawrence Shanklin was already negotiated maybe last summer, given the fact that he's moving from Hearts to Rangers completely free as part of some clause in the contract he signed last year. Don't think Rangers have bought anybody else or sold anybody else apart from bringing in Shankland. And it sounds like that deal was already in the pipeline, negotiated last summer. So I don't think Rangers have bought anybody. Don't think Rangers are negotiating for anybody. I don't think they've sold any players on. And I do think they are liable to have to sell 2 or 3 players to properly fund any kind of transfer market this summer. Michael Ross, I'd imagine if Neil wants the job, he'll be announced next week. My feeling, and again, this is just from reading lots of different articles, none of which are very definite or very clear. My feeling is that probably O'Neill and Desmond had a brief chat, maybe via Michael Nicholson or whatever, regarding Brian Wilson, via Wilson, the chairman, to say that O'Neill wanted a week just to gather his thoughts, have a chat with his wife and daughters, have a chat with Maloney, Fotheringham, McManus, Strachan, etc. So that would be my guess. What is that Desmond, etc., is giving him a week to come to his own conclusions, make his own decisions regarding whether he's got the stamina, the energy, etc. And my personal feeling is that O'Neill, I think, given the fact that how well this season has gone in the end, the fact that we've won the double, the fact that he brought the whole team together, he brought the club together, he brought the fans back into the fold. I think he's probably filled with a lot of energy. And I do also think that because the massive bulk of the training is done by Fotheringham, Maloney, McManus, Strachan, etc., that a lot of the physical energy so it's not so much, it's more the mental energy rather than the physical energy. David Stocker, is true Robbie Keane at Celtic Park today? I haven't seen anything like that, but different people read different stories. I haven't seen anything to suggest that Robbie Keane was at Celtic Park today. Yep, was like us. Shankland's been a lifelong Rangers fan. He's been desperate to go to Rangers 2 or 3 times over the last few years. And the story was that Shankland negotiated a new contract last summer with Hearts, which gave him a release clause for a free transfer if Rangers came in for him, and so it turned out. Pat McLaughlin saying Keane was seen in London mingling with some Celtic reps. Again, haven't seen that story myself, but then that's not to say that the story doesn't exist. There's millions of stories circulating at the moment. And certainly previous Celtic manager interviews have been done in London rather than done initially in Glasgow. So and certainly when Nancy came across for his interviews in October, November, prior to being appointed in December, the various different meetings with him and the other people on the shortlist were done in London. Lauren, I'm okay with Martin O'Neill. If he's keen, then it's better to lock it down for another season while the longer-term replacement search goes on. Keane, Bellamy, Clark, nobody's inspiring. My understanding is Stevie Clark has signed an extension with Scotland internationally for 4 years. The other name that a lot of people have been putting forward as being maybe someone being lined up for not this summer but the summer after, being Roberto Martinez. He obviously has got his duties with Portugal to finish off. Lauren, 63, we are about to undergo a massive rebuild. You could argue that keeping a consistent figurehead is necessary now. I think that makes an awful lot of sense. I think my personal feeling is that we should definitely get a manager who's got experience, which is where Martin O'Neill would be useful. He's got more experience than anybody else. I think Ange Postecoglou would be another person with that level of experience. 2 years at Celtic, but tons of years all around the world, bringing in new players and coaches and styles and tactics. Roberto Martinez obviously has got a lot of experience in international football, managed a couple of times in the English Premier League with relative success, but not great success. Yep, Wyoming CSC, I would tend to agree with what you're saying and Lauren's saying. I think O'Neill would be a steady hand on the steering wheel to take Celtic forward for at least 12 months. And then if that was keeping on going well and O'Neill was coping with the physical and mental energy levels, that it could extend that for another year or 2 years. But I do think, given the fact there's probably going to be at least maybe half a dozen players leaving and half a dozen players needing to be brought in, plus improvements in scouting, recruitment, etc. I think it does require someone older. It was like as Shankland. I don't think it was Shankland who was stamping on the phone. I think it was somebody else. However, Shankland was on camera pushing a Celtic fan who was sort of verbally taunting him, and Shankland certainly lost his temper and pushed the guy 2 or 3 times. But I think it was a different player that was stamping on the phone. So Lauren's saying it was Frankie Kent who stamped on the phone. And that does look. Frankie Kent's not a player I actually know very well, but I think from my vague memory of what he looks like, that's actually who it was. And of course, Frankie Kent's one of 4 Hearts players who've left the club at the end of their contract. Shankland's obviously left on a contract clause. Cammy Devlin hasn't signed his new contract. He's out of contract with Hearts. And Craig Gordon's out of contract with Hearts as well. So the 4 players have moved on. So Benigmini, the midfielder, and Kent and 2 others have all moved on. Plus Devlin's likely to be moving on a freedom of contract. And I would guess that probably Craig Gordon will retire after the World Cup because he only played 3 or 4 games last season. Michael Ross, Ange doesn't need to work. He's loaded. Well, certainly he would have got a big compensation package being sacked by Spurs, and then a big compensation package being sacked by Nottingham Forest. Particularly the one from Spurs, I think would have been a very big compensation package. Possibly with Notts Forest, it wouldn't have been quite so much because he's only there a short time. But and obviously, he earned a lot of money as Celtic manager. He earned money as the international manager of Australia rather, and managing in Japan. So my understanding is that. So I don't think that Ange Postecoglou has to work for money reasons. I think he would. There's talk about him managing one of the big clubs in Turkey, like Besiktas or Fenerbahce or someone along those lines. So. Yes, that was like I said. Yes, so I agree. There's a strong argument to say that Hearts Football Club or Frankie Kent, the player, should be paying for any repairs that person needed to their mobile phone. It's all on camera. It's all recorded. So, and the understanding is that the Scottish Police Service are investigating all the incidents of that day, the players, the fans coming onto the pitch, any kind of physical or verbal arguments, fights, etc., any physical pushing and shoving, as was the case with at least Shankland, and the damage to the fans' phone. All these things are all being investigated. Yep, Michael Ross, that's what I read today. Police have not received any official assault complaints from Hearts after the Celtic match. Whether Hearts are saying they're continuing to investigate it, maybe what Hearts are trying to do is they're putting together a video package of what they've got available, although I think they would probably be relying on Sky TV, BBC cameras, and obviously the police would have had cameras as well for crowd monitoring and so on, plus obviously any internal CCTV cameras that Celtic have got. To be thoroughly fair to Hearts, I dare say when Celtic lost the title at Motherwell 20 years ago, roughly ago, when we lost 2-1 in the last few minutes to Motherwell, I dare say the Celtic players and Celtic staff didn't stay terribly long after the game. Didn't leave, obviously, as quickly as the Hearts players and staff did, but I dare say the Celtic players didn't hang around for a long time after that game. So it's understandable. Hearts very, very disappointed. It's understandable. Hearts fans are very disappointed. It's very disappointing getting so close to winning a title and then it's ripped away from you at the last minute. I know how that felt losing to Motherwell 2-1. Know how it's felt to lose cup finals such as to Aberdeen last year, St Mirren this year's League Cup. Thinking away back to the UEFA Cup final when we lost 3-2 to Porto. That was a very disappointing, sad day as well. All I'm saying is, Pat McLaughlin, I completely agree. The professional players, they are supposed to applaud the winning team as they get their medals and get the cup, etc. I completely agree, but if we do say that the fans, some of the fans got carried away when Celtic scored that third goal and won the title there and then. If we can say the fans got a bit carried away, I think we can also say the Hearts players and Hearts staff are only human beings as well, and so they understandably are. We're angry, upset, disappointed, heartbroken, all these things. I do agree, and what I would really have hoped for was, had Hearts won the title, that the Celtic fans, the Celtic players, the Celtic staff, etc., would have applauded them and etc. So that's what, happily, we didn't actually have to witness Hearts raising the trophy at Celtic Park. So if we're talking about how long it took to get get the fans off the pitch, I think Martin Neal said 3 or 4 minutes, so 6 or 7 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes. Either way, the police and the stewards did a very good job of minimising the confrontations, minimising any risks of fans or players or staff or getting hurt. I think there were a few police officers, a few stewards who got hurt and pushed and shoved and knocked to the ground and stuff in all the melee and so on. Pat McLaughlin, I agree that I do think that had given how quickly the stewards and the police did their job, I dare say that the police and the stewards could have created a cordon for the players to go down to the fans. I don't think terribly many of the Hearts fans stayed to watch after the game was finished either. So, yes, Michael Ross. I would love to talk about other things. Whatever happens is happening. The police and the SFA and SPFL, etc., all the various different authorities are investigating it. So I think Michael Ross is making a good point. Let's talk about football things rather than talking about things that are past and things that are way beyond our control. And they're expecting some form of report in the next couple of weeks regarding any punishments that Celtic and Rangers will have, having had the quarter-final of the Cup a couple of months ago. And obviously there was a bit of an investigation after the Motherwell game, which had a brief crowd invasion, and obviously invasion again on the day of the winning the league. Happily, when we won the Cup on Sunday or last Saturday against Dunfermline, everybody stayed in their place. Good question, Wyoming CSC. Would I take Braga or Kazididis? I would. I think of those two, Braga would be the one I would be more keen to take. I thought Kazididis in the second half of the season wasn't nearly as dangerous as he had been in the first half of the season. I think a lot of players, a lot of defenders and managers worked out how better to defend Kazididis. He didn't play quite so much in the second half of the season, didn't play quite so well for me in the second half of the season. I think Braga was a goal threat throughout the whole season. I think he was struggling for fitness in the last week or so of the season. He only played obviously half an hour against Celtic in the final game. So, however, if of the two, I would take Braga. And I suspect that Braga probably is more likely to be able to step up another level to play for Celtic. I'm not so sure about Kazididis. Alan Forrest was one of the four that didn't get his contract renewed at Hearts. So, and as I say, Craig Gordon and Cammy Devlin haven't signed a new contract either. So they could be out the door also after the World Cup's finished. But they say I think at least three of the team that played against Celtic on the last day of the season have all been released on essence on free transfers. So Pat McLaughlin, I'd take Braga, but Hearts won't sell us a penny too after that other week. I think that may be the case. I think also the Lawrence Shanklin transfer kind of proves that players have an awful lot of power these days. We think how Dyson Maida kind of went into his shell at the start of the season when he had his transfer request to go to Wolfsburg turned down. If you think about players like Christopher Ayer, Ryan Christie, Odsonne Edward, none of them played terribly well after they decided they wanted to leave Celtic. So I suspect if Celtic went in with a bid for Braga and his agent would kind of force the move. It tends to be the way these days with players, which is why I think Dyson Maida is away this summer. Which is why I think Arnie Engels is away this summer. I think both of those two were given a promise that they could leave in the following transfer window if they stuck it out to the end of the season, much like we did for Matt O'Reilly, much like we did for Nicholas Kuhn and several others over the years. So, however, I would guess that Braga is probably destined for a team in Europe rather than coming to Celtic. Pat McLaughlin, that's an interesting point, and I would tend to agree. Just give me a wee second. I'm not so convinced as many pundits are that Hearts will be strong again next season. Hearts have got 2 or 3 players lined up to come in, one of whom was playing. So in essence, it appears they're replacing Frankie Kent with a player coming from Lincoln who might be very, very good. But it does appear that what they're tending to do is they're losing players like Shankland, releasing several players like Benigmini and Forrest and Frankie Kent, all of whom are experienced players, and they're bringing in very young, inexperienced players from lower leagues in England and lower leagues in Europe. There was talk about them going to bring in a person coming from the 3rd division. Can't remember what country it was, maybe Germany or whatever. So it doesn't sound like Hearts are aiming high in terms of their transfers. Yes, Pat McLaughlin, again, a really good point. This analytics, Jamestown analytics thing, it certainly got them a few good players in the summer transfer window. Only one of their winter transfer window players actually played much in the second half of the season. So I'm not convinced that the Jamestown analytics program for scouting is any better than any other system for scouting. And scouting and recruiting and transfers are always very hit and miss anyway. Pat McLaughlin, I still think that the squad that Celtic had last season was more than decent. I think it was better than many squads Celtic have had in my 54 years of watching Celtic. So I can think of many other teams who didn't have the core quality. And if you think about the fact that maybe 8 or 9 of our team are away to play in the World Cup this summer, 2 or 3 players would have been more than good enough to play at that level had their teams qualified. Callum McGregor would have been part of the Scotland squad. Mum was 100% certain had he not chosen to retire from international football. So I do actually think Celtic have a lot of quality throughout their team. They got the Finnish international goalkeeper, Canadian international right back. They've got 2 American centre backs, an Irish centre back, a Scottish left back, backed up by a Scottish right back, international right back, backed up on the other side by an international, Uruguayan international, midfielders, Engels and McGregor. Engels has been part of the Belgian squad, isn't at the moment. It has been. McGregor would still be a Scotland international if he wanted to. Haiyun Yang's off to the World Cup. Dyson Maida's off to the World Cup. And so on and so on and so on. Benjamin Nygren off to the World Cup. So we've got lots of players who are playing in the World Cup this summer, and lots of players who are good enough to be at the World Cup had their countries qualified for the World Cup. So I don't think Celtic squad last season was half as bad as some people thought. However, the fact that we relied so heavily on older players like Ralston, like Forrest, and we used rather too much for my liking players like McCowan coming off the bench, etc. So there were several gaps, and it's a strong question, although Kelechi Iheanacho did end up scoring 9 goals for us last season, or season just ended. It was questionable. We should really have had a couple of strikers better than him, with him and Osmond as being the 2 coming off the bench, with 2 other starters. Gary Simpson, all I can ever do is just give my honest opinion, and my opinion might be different from other people's opinion. I think Celtic have had far worse squads, far worse teams, and the thing that I was particularly, which is why I was still, despite the fact that we were in a poor position in January when O'Neill came back in, in terms of the number of defeats we'd had over the course of that Christmas New Year period, and that we were trailing Hearts by a lot of points, and Rangers had overhauled us, all these things. I thought the spirit of those players, if they got back together and started playing for them, playing for each other, playing for O'Neill and Maloney, playing for the fans, all these things. And I thought also the fans got back on board as well, which O'Neill was a big factor in doing. That Celtic, because of the team spirit, the team cohesion, and the solidarity of those players, and the motivating factors of Maloney and O'Neill and the fans supporting them, I thought they would come through. Michael Ross, I just give my opinion, and your opinion may well be a lot more right than mine. My personal feeling is that when 11, 12, 13 players go off for the international break, jetting all around the world, when we have 7 or 8 players going off to play in this summer's World Cup, for me it says that the players are not that bad, and that we've had poorer squads with a lot less quality in them in the past. But you have different opinions, which is 100% the joy of being a Celtic fan and being a football fan. I can remember bad spells in the late 70s, bad spells in the 80s, bad spells in the 90s. However, since Martin O'Neill came in 2000 onwards, we've had an excellent record in Scottish football. O'Neill got us some success in Europe, as did Gordon Strachan after that. Then we fell away in terms of European success for a long time. Very brief success last season with not last season, but the season before, with Brendan Rodgers getting us to the knockout phase of the Champions League. However, I think as we've debated pretty much every week for the last 3, 4, 5 months, I think the problems that Celtic had on the pitch, off the pitch, is a mixture of lots and lots of people not doing their job as well as they could have done. And so I'll say, just for clarity, I think the board members, the executives, etc., made mistakes, but they're human beings like us who make mistakes. Thus, not every transfer is going to go well, not every contract's going to go well. Not everybody that you bring in from another football club or another organisation is going to necessarily be a 100% success. Some players are big surprises. Some players do far better than expected. Some players do far worse than expected. You can spend lots and lots of money on a player and they turn out to be rubbish. You can spend nothing on a player and they turn out to be very, very good. Michael Ross, I think one of the mistakes that Rodgers, Nancy, and O'Neill made was playing Kasper Schmeichel when he wasn't 100% fit. How much of that decision was down to Rodgers, O'Neill, and Nancy, how much of it was down to the physios, how much of that was down to the doctors, the orthopedic surgeons, the shoulder specialists, how much of that was down to Schmeichel, how much of that was down to Stevie Woods, the goalkeeping coach. Again, much the same as all the other issues at Celtic. I think the medical staff made errors, that Stevie Woods, the goalkeeping coach, didn't stand up and say, Schmeichel's not good enough, we have to give him a few weeks to rest. His shoulder's really bothering him. Because for goodness sake, if Schmeichel is struggling in game time as he was for crosses and making certain saves and diving onto his shoulder, that should be all picked up by Stevie Woods, the goalkeeping coach, who was actually watching him day in, day out, week in, week out. So I think it's a combination of all those different factors. The three managers maybe not taking the bull by the horns and resting Schmeichel for a few weeks to see whether he can get his shoulder better, or maybe, as what I thought personally was, once the 24-25 season finished, Schmeichel should have been sent off to see a shoulder specialist, and if he required surgery, he required surgery. And if that meant he was out of football for 6 months, but back for Christmas of 2025, that meant that he would have had 6 months of football for Celtic, 6 months of football for Denmark. So, and potentially he could have got to go to play in the World Cup had Denmark qualified. I think, unfortunately, he played on through the pain. The medical people, the physios, the doctors, the orthopedic surgeons, the goalkeeping coaches, and the three managers didn't take the initiative and didn't put Schmeichel into surgery and rehab and played Sinisalo. As it turns out, Sinisalo had a very good time, I thought, as a goalkeeping Celtic's goalkeeper for the last 3 or 4 months of the season. Kenneth Todd, good evening to you, Kenneth Todd. Do you think Maida's turn of form was due to the return of the Green Brigade? My personal feeling that Dyson Maida was out of form because Dyson Maida, is a human being who's out of form. He tends to be, from what people say who know him, he tends to be quite a person who is in his own head. He's not a person who really expresses his emotions and his thoughts to other people. Quite often, people like that get very, very critical of themselves. So people like that, if they miss a chance or make a mistake, it tends to affect them more, and they tend to then start worrying about it. A lot of his best finishes for Celtic in this last 2 or 3 months of the season were the ones where he was very, very instinctive. You think about the overhead bicycle kick that's scored against Rangers. You think about that lovely lob in the cup final. You think about his instinctiveness to get just to the perfect place for Osman's cross to score the second goal against Hearts. A lot of his success was when he wasn't really given time to think. He just did things by inspiration or by magic, basically. He tends to be someone who misses a lot of chance when he's got 3 or 4 seconds to gather his thoughts. He tends to miss. When he's got 1 second to gather his thought and just goes bang and shoots instinctively, it tends to go well. So I think another reason possibly for Maida's return to form was also he was part of a Japanese international squad that played against England and Scotland on the last international break just after the Dundee United match. And I do wonder whether maybe the Japanese manager gave him kind of an ultimatum that he really had to get himself back into good form, otherwise he wouldn't be in the World Cup this summer. I don't know. I think you're quite right. I think he does enjoy the crowd, but then I think all players enjoy the crowd. So I think probably it's part of just Dyson Maida maybe having an ultimatum to up his form to get into the Japanese squad, but also maybe just being a bit more relaxed. Maybe Maloney, O'Neill, etc., got him kind of less introspective and less self-critical, which people say that he can be the case for him. Yes. So, Lord, my understanding with Kasper Schmeichel's injury, he dislocated his shoulder playing for Denmark against Portugal. He had to stay on the pitch because Denmark had no more subs to play. So he played about 10, 15 minutes with a dislocated shoulder that had been put back in place. He then had 2 or 3 weeks off. He had physio, he had ultrasound, he had injections, and Rodgers rushed him back in to play the last 2 or 3 games of the season, including the cup final, which went badly wrong, and he was partly to blame for the Aberdeen goal. I dare say probably over the course of June and July, his shoulder settled down because he wasn't playing very much football. And it sounds like over the course of the season just ended, his shoulder was okay at some times, worse at other times, kept on flaring up. And then the story was that during the Stuttgart match, he landed on his shoulder and redislocated his shoulder and tore a lot of ligaments and internal structures within his shoulder. And so the second injury against Stuttgart made the first injury that had never properly healed from the Portugal-Denmark game get far, far worse. But you're entirely right. My understanding is he had a scan or two between the original injury and the Stuttgart injury. He had a couple of scans, and he had been to see various different orthopedic specialists and shoulder specialists, which is why he was having joint injections and painkiller injections every so often. Well, Perry 840, I would say that to a lesser extent, Cal McGregor has been playing for the last 2 or 3 years with a chronic Achilles tendon and calf problem. He's had injections, he's had physiotherapy, he's had spells where he doesn't train all week, but he plays at the weekend in the game. So McGregor, to a lesser extent, has been playing partly injured for the last 2 or 3 years. And of course, last season just finished, and the season before, McGregor has had spells of 2, 3, 4, 5 games out. I think he missed 2 or 3 games last season. Good evening to you, Tripper67. Lovely to have you on. So Greenford Go 1969. Yang is no more than a squad player. He shouldn't be starting games, as we should aim for better. Fans saying he makes good runs. Does that constitute being a first-team starter the team needs? Ripped. Yang was the third top scorer for Celtic last season. He had Nygren on 21, Maida on 17 for the season, Yang on 10 for the season. So he was Celtic's third top scorer. He was the second most successful tackler in the side after Kieran Tierney. So he was more successful in his tackles than McGregor, Engels, Hattati, Johnston, Scales, Trusty, etc. So only one player in the whole team was better at successful tackles than Yang. I thought Yang improved a lot last season, but I do agree. I don't think he should be our first choice wide player on the right or the left. I think you're quite right. He should be the number one backup or the number two backup, depending on how fit Jota ever gets. And the longer that Jota is out for, the less and less likely he's going to come back anywhere near as good as he was before. In general, people who have an anterior cruciate injuries like he did, if they're not back playing within 12 months, and that's now 13 months for Jota, and the thought is he's not going to be back until October, November, so that'll be 18 months out of football. They don't tend to do very, very well. And it's often those are the ones who have to have another surgery operation, another operation for something else, or more and more rehab and more strengthening, etc. So it is actually starting to get a wee bit worrying how long Jota's been out for. So what I would say is my personal thoughts about Yang. Season is finished. He worked very, very hard for Celtic. He scored 10 goals for us. He played right wing, left wing. He played right wing back, left wing back. He played all over the place. He did his best to fit in with the Nancy system. He did his best to listen to what O'Neill and Maloney and stuff were saying. And as I said, he added tackling and ball winning back to his game. He came and played a lot more in midfield than he had before. He started to be a sort of other version of Dias and Maida, in that he was dropping into midfield, winning the ball back in midfield, etc. But we should do better, could do better. So I think Celtic need to have Chinecki and Yang as our two backup wide players, James Forrest as the backup after those two backups. And then when Jota comes back, if he ever does come back, then he would obviously move ahead of those two once he got fit. But I think Celtic need to have a top level wide left player and a top level wide right player. So somebody of the general ability of a Nicholas Kudin playing up and down the right side, and someone like that but playing up and down the left side. Whether Chinecki can get better, whether Yang can keep on getting better is a different matter. So I completely agree, Kenneth. I don't think Yang is of the quality of a fit Jota, a fit Nicholas Kuhn, a fit Dias and Maida, or a young James Forrest from 10 years ago, or a Ben Gannon-Doak, who we unfortunately let go of to play for Liverpool, then Bournemouth. But I think personally, Yang is Yang and Chinecki are good backup wide players, but we need to have someone definitely better than both of those two, particularly because, as I say, Jota's not going to be back until October, November. What was like a Celtic need within also a top striker as Chavin Chad was not Celtic class at all. Whether it's a question of paying out more in terms of transfer fees, as I've said before, it may not be necessarily paying out a big transfer fee. It may be paying a player big wages so that they choose to come to play for Celtic in Scotland rather than playing for Crystal Palace or Bournemouth or Ipswich or whatever in the English Premier League, or choose to come to us rather than going to play for Feyenoord or Ajax or Sporting Lisbon, etc. So a wee bit similar to how we got Benjamin Nygren to come to play for Celtic rather than 4 or 5 other better offers he had in bigger leagues, because Celtic did actually shell out a lot more money to get him in terms of his contract, which made him opt to come to Celtic rather than going to 2 or 3 other options he had in other parts of Europe. Michael Ross, Yang's worth keeping, Chinecki is garbage. All I would say about Chinecki is we do need to remember that unlike any other player in the Celtic team, Chinecki had been playing football non-stop for about 13 or 14 months because of the Swedish season running from spring to autumn. It meant that Chinecki had played a whole season in Sweden, then came to play for Celtic in right at the end of August, start of September, played a whole season with Celtic, obviously. In between, he was playing internationally for Tunisia, so lots of extra travelling to be a Tunisian international. So he's not actually had, unlike all the other Celtic players who had a month or so off during this last summer of 2025, to have a rest. He played all the way through from spring 25 in Sweden, all the way through that season, finished the season in Sweden, came to play for Celtic. So maybe he is a bit tired. So I'd be willing to give Chinecki a go, because some of what Chinecki did over the course of this season, he scored some great goals for Celtic, some great runs, but he was very inconsistent. And one could say the same about Yang. One could say the same about Daizen for that matter. I completely agree. Was like a Celtic need to be better in recruitment. They need to try and improve the number of successes that they get in terms of transfers. However, virtually every transfer window, there will be some transfers that go well, some transfers that don't go well, some which are a disaster. And Celtic's transfer window last summer, we had some big successes. Tierney, I think you call a big success. Benjamin Negan, obviously a big success. Chinecki did okay. Few of the players were bought more to develop for the future. So Callum Osmond, one could say that he was a limited success. Once he got a chance to play under Martin O'Neill, having been frozen out by Brendan Rodgers, he started off playing really pretty well, scored against Rangers in the League Cup semi-final, unfortunately got himself injured, then missed 5 months of football, came back, and he was a big factor in the win against Hearts. Scored a goal and created a goal, and I thought he looked very, very active, very, very good in those limited games. The game against Rangers in the semi-final of the League Cup, the subsequent European game when he got himself injured, and then the last game of the season against of the league season against Hearts, where he scored a goal and created a goal. And I think he's got a lot of skills that next season and the season after, once he gets fully matured and fully experienced, I think he's going to turn into a very good player for Celtic. However, we do need another top quality striker to lead the team and lead the line. YMCSC, I don't think Kelechi Iheanacho or Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain were on anything like the wages that they had been on at previous clubs. It depends a wee bit on your definition of what you would call massive wages. So I think they were both Oxlade-Chamberlain and Iheanacho were in the top 10, but not the top 5 of wage earners at Celtic. So still, Tierney at £50,000 a week is the top earner at Celtic. Then you've got the next level of McGregor, Carter-Vickers, and Jota. And then a wee bit down from that, you've got the Negrons, the Maidas, the Hitatis. Alison Johnson's been bumped up to that level. So I think Iheanacho and Oxlade-Chamberlain were in the level of the sort of the around about sixth top earner to 10th top earner, somewhere in that region. Sorry, just a wee gremlin with the computer there. What was it? Yes. So, my understanding is neither Iheanacho nor Oxlade-Chamberlain were on anything like the wages they had been at previous clubs, and they kind of fitted themselves into the upper third of wage earners at Celtic. Sorry, just having one or two problems with my computer. Right. So Trusty, I think I think Trusty is a very capable player. I think one of the problems that Trusty had is that as a defender, you do need people to make runs for you. So you do need midfielders to make good runs for you. You do need strikers to make good runs for you. And part of the problem I think Trusty's got, the same that actually Liam Scales has got, is that under Rodgers and under O'Neill, they both want everything to go through Callum McGregor to start with. And so when a team marks Callum McGregor well, or Callum McGregor's energy levels and speed isn't up to scratch, it does mean that the other teams that Trusty Scales have no one to pass to, because the primary focus is on Callum McGregor within the way that O'Neill and Rodgers had set the team up. I personally don't think that Trusty was getting bullied any more than Liam Scales gets bullied by big, tall, strong centre forwards. And I thought personally that both Trusty and Scales generally during a game found out ways to combat. So if a team were playing in a certain way, I thought Trusty and Scales, particularly Trusty, were good at finding ways to counter-attack and counteract what that attacker was doing or wide player was doing. So I think Trusty and Scales are both decent centre-backs. Again, for me, they should be the third and fourth choices at Celtic, assuming that Carter Vickers gets back fit. So we should definitely have a person to partner Carter Vickers, and then Scales and Trusty as our two backups. But I don't really personally get the fact that Trusty was being bullied. I think Trusty, like anybody, makes mistakes now and again. What I thought in all the games where he didn't start so well, he found ways to control the person he was marking or trying to stop, etc. If we think about the Rangers 0, Celtic 0 game in the Cup quarter-final, I thought Trusty played brilliantly in that game, defending against Chermiti, defending against Nadieri, defending against Miovski, all the players, no matter who they threw on to play against them, he defended brilliantly. And remembering in that game, he had Benjamin Arthur and Dane Murray as his partners because Tierney had been left out due to injury and Scales had gone to left back. Was like some of Trusty's best performances have been away from home in defensive games. Thinking about the Atalanta game that ended up as 0-0. So I think he actually in European games has had some of his best games for Celtic. And as I say, I thought one of Trusty's best games all season was the 0-0 draw against Rangers in the Cup quarter-final, the one we won on penalties, where, as I said, he started with Arthur as his partner and then swapped to Dane Murray, and I thought he defended brilliantly in that game. He controlled the defence, and then, as I say, Scales played very well at left back in that game because Tierney was out injured. And that's a really good point, Pat McLaughlin. I wish I thought of that myself, remembering Trusty has, for his whole life, played as a left centre-back, and he's had to play right centre-back for virtually all the season. So obviously Trusty missed the first couple of months with a foot problem. Basically, when he got fit again to play, that's when Carter Vickers went out with his Achilles tendon rupture. Rodgers did play Dane Murray in place of him for one game. That was the game against Hearts where we got beaten 3-1. Thereafter, what was like us? You're entirely Paul Elliott, Virgil van Dijk, Johan Mjällby, but thinking that you've got Billy McNeill, one of the greatest Scottish players of all time, one of Celtic's greatest players in the 100 and however many years it is that Celtic's been going. Virgil van Dijk, possibly the best defender in the world at different points of his career, particularly when he got transferred to Liverpool, rated the #1 defender, central centre-back in the world. So we're not going to too often get one of the best players of all time in Scottish football and one of the best players in Europe in his position currently and for the last 5 years. So Paul Elliott, very decent centre-back. Jan Mjällby, very decent centre-back. And as Pat McLaughlin was saying, Trusty's been playing on the other side of defence. Yep. Celtic, when we signed Virgil van Dijk from Dutch football, he was pretty much an unknown player. I certainly, when Virgil van Dijk came to Celtic, had never heard of him before. He became very, very quickly a very good player for Celtic, very mobile centre-back, good on the ball, good in the air, good leader of the team. Went on to play for Southampton, big success there. Went on to play for Liverpool, gone on to be the club captain at Liverpool, led them to various different trophies, etc. So I think, however, some players like him keep on getting better and better and better, coming as young players, relatively unproven in his case, and he became a superstar player. So Wyoming CSE, now Rocky's fitness. So apparently he didn't have a good start to his time with Hanover, but the second half of his season at Hanover went very, very well, scoring goals, defending well, and to the point where Celtic have actually so Hanover are in negotiations with Celtic about selling Nawrocki. One of the problems with Nawrocki is that Hanover didn't get promoted from Bundesliga 2 to Bundesliga 1. So whether Nawrocki would want to go back to play permanently for a Bundesliga 2 side, I don't know. He has both German heritage and Polish heritage, so maybe he would choose to go back to play in Germany. But in general terms, Nawrocki's value, transfer value, and so on has gone up in the second half of the season with Hanover. So, Greenford goal. Well, we can say all we like about about Austin Trusty, but he is one of Celtic's players who's playing at the World Cup, so he's one of the best 4 or 5 central defenders, not just in the whole of America. So and as I say, I think when Trusty was playing as left centre back last season with Carter Vickers on his right, I thought he played far better. As I say, I don't think Scales and Trusty are a particularly good combination. They're both left-footed centre backs. They both can get a bit nervous with their passing if there's not good options. However, I think my personal thing is Trusty and Scales are both very decent, good club quality centre backs who have been able to step up to international level. Both Scales and Trusty are current internationals. No. Pat McLaughlin, you are entirely right. Scales is not a playmaker. And I do. My personal feeling is, again, if a lot of the role was handed over to Cameron Carter-Vickers, as it has been, to be Trusty's partner for much of last season and Scales' partner for much of last season too. So basically, Scales and Trusty shared last season when they were fit, 50-50 partnering Carter-Vickers. I think having Carter-Vickers beside them is a big help. And then Carter-Vickers takes over some of the passing role, some of the organization role. Yep, but you're quite right. Carter-Vickers is generally a good passer. He's generally happy to step into midfield. Again, one of the difficulties we also don't really know is what Rodgers asked Trusty and Scales to do and what O'Neill has asked Trusty and Scales to do in terms of how far forward they're supposed to come. Remembering under Wilfred Nancy, Trusty, Scales, Tierney, Ralston, etc., were all encouraged to bomb forward, come up to midfield, and get into the opposition half, etc. And that didn't go terribly well. So maybe that's the reason that Trusty and Scales were encouraged to not be so forward thinking as they may have been before. Paradise Huddle, you'll never walk alone. Or yes. AJ coming back from injury has been a godsend. Trusty stepped up for the club, won the double. Yes, so I think Alistair Johnson came back at just the right time. He played maybe 7 games. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he came back just at the perfect time. Came back for the final league games of the season. He played the cup final, obviously, and by the end of the season, he was able to play obviously 3 games in 6 days at the end of the season. Then play the whole game of the cup final. And I think he makes Celtic a much better side. Defensively, he's good. In midfield, he's good, and he gets forward as well. And I think what's more, he's also an organizer and a backup captain to Callum McGregor. I think he's a lot more noisy on the pitch and a lot more of an organizer than Liam Scales is. Kieran Tierney, they both seem to be quite quiet players. However, I think Alistair Johnson was very good at getting the rest of the back 4 organised. I think as Pat McLaughlin was maybe as Paradise Huddle's implying, maybe also that Johnson on his right-hand side gave Trusty a bit more confidence than he had with Donovan, Ralston and Arojo on his other side. I think in most areas of a pitch, you get good partnerships between full-backs and centre-backs on both sides, the centre-backs with the midfielders with the wide players, the right-back with the right winger. I think all these things are true. Also, Engels came back just before Johnson came back. Engels came back, and I think Engels took a lot of pressure off of Callum McGregor. I think also Engels helped out with the right back zone, the centre backs pushing forward into midfield. Wyoming CSC were nowhere near a Champions League team and probably won't be when the season starts. I think Celtic have got a good chance of coming through the final qualifier round of the Champions League qualifiers. The snag for Celtic, as it is for all those clubs, is that we'll be playing the first qualifying leg about 2 or 3 weeks into our main season. So we'll be coming back to play our first league game around about the 1st or 2nd of August. 2 weeks later, we're playing the first of the 2-legged games. The week after that, we're playing the second leg. So the difficulty is, obviously, with one third of the squad away on World Cup duty, we're going to have quite a number of players who are going to be playing the World Cup into early July, possibly a few playing the World Cup into the second week of July. So not many of the players are actually going to have much of a break between the end of the World Cup and the start of the league season. The World Cup finals somewhere about the middle of July. So you think about that. If players are in teams that get through into the knockout stages, they're going to be playing in those countries until late June, early July. So they're going to get 3 or 4 weeks of a gap between one thing and the other. So they're not actually going to get much of a break. So there could be some players who are rather fatigued, or some players who are late getting back into training, which does make getting everybody fighting fit and settled in for the first week of August, and particularly for the 3rd and 4th weeks in August, rather a problem. I don't think Celtic did a very good job last season where we didn't have the complication of the World Cup. Don't think Celtic got their best 11 players and best 5 or 6 substitutes all sorted out over the pre-season. And so there was still quite a lot of coming and going and uncertainty regarding positions and players and so on when we started the season. Partly due to the fact we'd been slow getting players in, partly because several players like Carter Vickers and Johnston and a few others, Hattati, Maeda, were all late coming back into pre-season training. Well, Alison Timpany in Austin, we don't trust. Trusty no more. Move him on. I would say before we start ditching Austin Trusty, I think it would be fair to have him playing at left centre back, which is his better position. Or if we do go to a back three, having him as the centre of the centre back of the central centre back of 3 centre backs, which I think he also would cope with far better. I think having him as the right side of centre back is playing him out of position. George Hegarty. I think Scales is a good player, and don't get that some of the Celtic fans don't like him. I think Liam Scales is a good, hard-working player. He's a good, honest player. I think his ceiling is playing for Celtic. I don't think he is a player who would want to leave Celtic, much the case as it was with Ralston, McGregor, Forrest, who've all stuck at Celtic for a long, long time. I think that was I think it's Liam Scales' dream is to play for Celtic, and he's getting to play for Celtic. I don't think he's a player who would be looking to move on. And I think Scales is a perfect, for me, as I said before, Scales and Trusty, for me, should be our third choice and fourth choice centre-backs, assuming that Carter Vickers gets back fit for the start of the season upcoming. He was training very, very well at the end of the season. That should mean he'll be able to do a full pre-season training, get himself 100% fit for the start of the season in August. He's not playing in the World Cup, obviously, so he'll have a full pre-season. Now, last pre-season, summer of 2025, he didn't have a full pre-season. He had knee surgery in, I think, July of 2025 or June 2025, which meant that he was rehabbing when he should have been pre-season training. So he hardly had played at all when the season started against St Mirren at the start of August, which is probably part of why he tore his Achilles a couple of months later, because he wasn't fully match fit and fully trained up, and because of the delays in the summer. Ernest Mosley, Welsh is a better option than Trusty. Well, the benefit that Welsh had playing for Motherwell was he played in the position that he plays at. As I said, all season, once Trusty got back into the team after he's recovered from his foot injury, which coincided with Carter Vickers going out with his Achilles injury, for the rest of the season, he was playing out of his natural position. So briefly under Nancy, there were three left-footed centre-backs playing as the three centre-backs. So he was playing right centre-back in a back three for a while. Then he moved to the central centre-back, but the problem was the person on his right was Ralston, who was a right-back, not a centre-back. So one could argue that all season Austin Trusty has been playing with metaphorically one arm or one leg tied behind his back, in that he's been playing out of position, in a position that's not natural for him, and also playing with Liam Scales, a player who he hadn't actually played with very much before, because when Trusty came in, it was either him or Scales partnering Carter Vickers on the right-hand side. So he hadn't actually played with Scales very much. And I don't think Scales and Trusty are a natural partnership in terms of their styles and ways of playing football. But I'm not disagreeing with the fact that Celtic need to get in one even better centre-back, so that when Carter Vickers fit, we've got Carter Vickers and centre-back number 2, whoever that is, and then backed up by Scales and Trusty. And I think both Scales and Trusty are good enough to step into the side for injuries and suspensions and fatigue and rotation and so on. Keeping our first and second choice centre-backs for the big games and for European games, etc. And I think Scales would be happy to play the backup role, backing up Carter Vickers and backing up somebody as good or better than Carter Vickers as our first choice. So Pat McLaughlin saying Nicholas Otamendi on a free transfer. I think there's an awful lot of players out there on a free transfer. Player power is very much something that everybody's having to get used to. I suspect if Nicholas Otamendi is available on a free transfer, there are probably 20 clubs lining up to sign him. Just like apparently it was something like 30 clubs lined up to sign Luke Graham, the Dundee centre-back. Yes. Yep, Pat McLaughlin is quite a list. I'm sure there is. The difficulty is there are an awful lot of good players out there, but convincing them to come and play in Scotland is another matter. I think it was a wee bit easier for getting players to come and play in Scotland when we were guaranteed guaranteed to be in the Champions League. Obviously, that was the case for 2 or 3 seasons. It wasn't the case last season. We had to get through one qualifying round, which we failed to do. We've got the same scenario this season, one qualifying round to get through to get into the Champions League. I personally think, assuming that Celtic do add 2 or 3 players and they get a fully fit Alison Johnson for the whole season, a fully fit Cameron Carter-Vickers for the whole season, I think Celtic could, with a few upgrades in a couple of positions, cope just as well this Champions League, assuming we qualify for the one coming up in later in 2026, as well as we did the one a couple of years ago. However, remembering in that Champions League, we did have the benefit of having a good, fully fit Nicholas Kuhn, a fully fit Alison Johnson, a fully fit Cameron Carter-Vickers, and so on and so on. And Dice Mido on the other side. Wemming is he a fit CCV for the whole season? Well, to be fair to Cameron Carter-Vickers, we did have him for his first season for Celtic when he was on loan from Spurs. We had him for the whole season. He played really well. I think it was actually he'd started to get particular injury problems when we swapped from Ange Postecoglou to Brendan Rodgers. It seemed to be under the Brendan Rodgers managership or physio or whatever training regimes that he started to get very injury prone. And I think the problem with Carter-Vickers was he had one injury that led into another injury, that led into another injury, that led into another injury. Now, the hope is, with him having had, 9 months roughly not playing football, from around about September time through to coming back to play properly in July and August, that having that long break allows all his other aches and pains in his knees and his feet, etc., to have got better. And generally, when you are rehabbing from a major surgery like an Achilles tendon, you will be building up your knees, building up your calf muscles, building up your ankle joints, etc. So, that's a good point as well, Michael Ross. Stephen Welsh was forever being injured when he was a Celtic player. He seemed to be able to get through the whole season with Motherwell not having a single injury. And he did play very, very well in Motherwell's system. And he was quite an important player for them. So my memory might be wrong. In the couple of years under Ange Postecoglou, Carter-Vickers pretty much played pretty much every game, and he was pretty fit for every game. I think he did have one or two knee problems at the end of Ange Postecoglou's second season, and it did appear under Brendan Rodgers that he was forever having some problem or other. I think he had surgery on his knee on a couple of occasions. He had more major surgery last summer that kind of slowed down his pre-season. And obviously major Achilles tendon problem in good point as well, Kenneth Todd, is that I think Alison Johnson is a very, very important player for Celtic. I would guess Kieran Tierney, assuming he gets through the World Cup, will be fitter and better and stronger this season upcoming than he has been last season. He played a pretty remarkable number of games for Celtic. The season just finished, although he didn't actually finish that many games, but he did actually play. He played 53 games for Celtic last season of the 58 games that we played in all competitions. So Kieran Tierney only actually missed 5 games all season. Now, admittedly, quite a lot of those games he started but didn't finish them. A few of them he came on as a sub. But he still did play 53 games of football last season. And my expectation is next season, assuming that he has a good World Cup, is that he'll be fitter, stronger, better, more endurance, and more able to finish off more and more games next season. So theoretically, even a more better player next season than he was this season. He was Celtic's number 1 for assists this season. He was. He scored 6 goals for Celtic this season as well, which put him up alongside Engels and Hatate and so on in terms of goal scoring. So he did contribute a lot for us last season. I certainly hope so, Ernest. Mostly, hopefully Kieran Tierney will smash it this season, next season. My expectation is that Benjamin Nygren will be at Celtic for at least one more season. I don't think he's probably proven enough to teams who might want to buy him from bigger, richer leagues that he's got the all-around game. Nygren, 21 goals and 9 assists, which was very impressive. He played all 58 games for Celtic last season, which again is very impressive. But I don't think he's quite got the all-around game to convince a team in England or France or Spain, Italy, Germany to buy him. So I think he's got another season or two at Celtic, maybe a wee bit similar to Matt O'Reilly, who had 2.5 seasons at Celtic. Michael Ross, I wish KT retired from international football and had all summer to recoup. Well, I wouldn't be too surprised if Kieran Tierney is somebody who maybe retires after this World Cup. Obviously, Scotland hasn't been to a World Cup for a million years, so I suspect there are quite a few players who maybe have hung on to play this World Cup, and then they'll be planning to retire after this. As I say, got a very, very strong suspicion that Craig Gordon, who's out with the Scottish squad for the World Cup, will retire at the end of that. I had a strong feeling actually that had Kasper Schmeichel gone to play in the World Cup for Denmark, that he also would have retired at the end of the World Cup for Denmark. Obviously, he's retired that bit early because his shoulder's too badly injured and won't get better. Enough better to play football again. Alison Timpany, hope Nygren toughens up. I could tackle him to the deck right now. Mind you, I'm a bit of an animal. Well, I do think I think if somebody could work with Nygren to develop those other bits of his game that he's not particularly good at, I think he could turn into a very, very good player for Celtic and be more likely to leave Celtic sooner rather than later. But I don't see Benjamin Nygren leaving Celtic this summer. I do see him being at Celtic at least one more season, probably 2 more seasons. But Alison Timpany, do agree 100% if we could add a bit more of midfield bite, tackling, ball winning, tracking runs, all these things that Nygren tries to do but not terribly well. If we could make him 50% better at all those different things, we would have a very, very capable midfielder who can score goals for us, can create goals for us. So a wee bit similar to how Matt O'Reilly turned into in his final season for Celtic, where he was an equal top scorer and the top assist maker in the first Brendan Rodgers season. And of course, he got sold the following summer. Not been terribly successful with Brighton or with his loan clubs, much the same as Nicholas Kuhn's not been very successful with Como. But there were vague rumours that O'Reilly and Kuhn might be coming back to Celtic. I think both those stories have kind of ebbed away and not proven to be true. There's an awful lot of stories at the moment going around. So for me, if we're still talking about Benjamin Nygren, he doesn't seem cut out for the hurly-burly battling midfield role that other players play for at Celtic. However, Matt O'Reilly wasn't really a player that mixed it off an awful lot before. When he was at Celtic, he was much more the creative player, the goal-scoring player. When Rodgers had him as the sort of attacking midfielder role for that very successful season, other people were mostly having to do the tackling and ball winning and stuff in midfield. Brad Ladd 88. Wish to God we kept Sirachi. He's exactly what we need. Comes inside, bombs the line, and he's got that killer touch and eye for a pass. Well, it's the perfect example of you read one story about what's happening with Marcello Sirachi, you read a different story about what's happening with Marcello Sirachi, you read a third story about what's happening with Marcello Sirachi, and all three stories, all claiming to know exactly what's going on with Sirachi, say different things. One story suggesting that Celtic have been in negotiations with the parent club, and that's still ongoing. Some say that there's been negotiations, but they've not come to any conclusion. Some say that Celtic have not offered him stuff. Some say that Celtic have offered him stuff, and it's still under negotiations. So there have been about 5 different stories with 5 different conclusions about Sirachi, all of which we'll see what happens with Marcello Sirachi. My personal feeling has always been, if there was an offer of a club for him to move to, which was a Spanish-speaking club, such as moving to play in Spain or moving to play with one of the other South American countries, Argentina, Uruguay, etc., that he would opt to go there first. Also, the thing to remember is, at Celtic, he's going to be the designated number 2 left-back behind Kieran Tierney, which might also not be terribly what he wants to do at his age in his career. He managed to get himself back on the verges of the full Uruguayan squad, so he may not want to drop to being the number 2 left-back at Celtic, particularly if Kieran Tierney actually is able to play more games next season through to the end. Sirachi's role would really diminish. So, Lauren 6348. Hope the girls can get the win on Sunday. Not likely, though. They're a poor side. I think, just briefly branching off, I think the women's team are a good team who were starting to get back to good form when Elena Saduku left to go and manage the Swedish champions. And it does feel like the team has kind of fallen apart. And they never seem to know these days who the starting 11 should be, what tactics, what formation, etc. And I think there's also about a dozen of the current squad who are out of contract this summer, which I don't think is good for morale. So I frantically hope that Celtic do beat Rangers in the cup final on Sunday. Hopefully Celtic get a big crowd to support them at Hampden Park. I think that would help them as well. And remembering that Rangers are coming off a 6-0 defeat to Glasgow City last Sunday and losing any chance of winning the league. So I think probably a lot of the Rangers players will be very low in their mood, low in their confidence, because they got absolutely thumped by Glasgow City last week. So the question is whether the players and the managers can get our players to get back up to playing how they did do when they did beat Hibs and Hearts and Glasgow City. So they've already beaten 3 of the top 4 in Scotland on the way to this final. So they just have to beat the 4th of the top 4 to win the cup. So they have actually had a really difficult set of games: Hibs, Hearts, Glasgow City, to get to the final. Completely agree, Lawrence 6-3-4-8. They got a terrible record against Rangers in recently. Not won a game against Rangers since Elena Sadiku's first season. So very disappointing. However, they did get up to beat Hearts, they did get up to beat Hibs, they did get up to beat Glasgow City in the semi-final. So maybe the same bunch of players can get themselves up to beat Rangers on Sunday. Pat McLaughlin, don't think Sirachi's got particular injury worries. He did actually have, obviously, 2 hamstring injury problems whilst he was at Celtic, which kept him out for a few weeks. He came back, got re-injured straight away, out for another month or so. So I don't think he's particularly injury prone. Not the way that Kieran Tierney was for 3 or 4 years. But Sirachi has kind of been here, there, everywhere. He's played in quite a lot of different countries and quite a lot of different leagues. However, my feeling with Sirachi was that he probably doesn't want to be the backup left back at a club. He probably wants to be the number 1 left back. And I think he probably would prefer to be playing in a country that is Spanish-speaking rather than English-speaking, because I don't think his standard of English was that brilliant, which makes it more difficult to fit in with teammates, fit in with team talks and tactics and stuff. So also, I don't think there were any other natural Spanish-speaking players in the squad this season. With obviously Luis Palma, who was Spanish-speaking, he was off playing in Poland. I don't think we had any other Spanish-speaking players, I guess a few players probably do speak a bit of Spanish, but yep, Feed the Bear, Sirachi, great player, Arojo, great player. They both had a tremendous attitude, and that was something that for me is a very positive thing. And I think actually the attitude of quite a lot of the players in the squad to step up and cope with the pressure was a big factor in why Celtic went 7 wins in a row in the league, and the Rangers lost a whole lot of games. Hearts won some, lost some, drew some in that final spell. So I do think it's actually, there's a lot to be said for the attitude of a lot of the players in the Celtic squad, that they stepped up and coped with the pressure. They stepped up when things got really difficult and high pressure, and they coped better. Belfast Celt, Irish Celt, our bold will say, don't worry about Sirachi because we have Adam Montgomery. I think my personal feeling is if Arojo wants to come and play for Celtic, or Sirachi wants to come and play for Celtic, Celtic will make efforts for them to come and play for Celtic. But I'm not convinced that either Arojo or Sirachi, from what they have said, wanted to play for Celtic. Remembering, if Arojo did come to play for Celtic and Sirachi did come to play for Celtic, the way things are at the moment, Arojo would be backing up Johnston and Sirachi would be backing up Tierney, because at the moment Tierney and Johnston are our starting right back and left back. Whether players at this point in their career want to be playing as backups when they could be playing as starters in other countries and other leagues. Now, reportedly, there are about half a dozen clubs in America and Mexico who want to sign Arojo from Bournemouth. So apparently he's had a lot of offers from the Mexican League and Major League Soccer in America for him to come back and play in Central America. So, and given the fact that's where he's from, he may well choose to go and be the first choice right back of LA Galaxy, or the first choice right back for Mexico City, or whoever it might be. And I think that's the same. Personally, I think it's the same for Marcelo Sirachi. I think they don't want to be backup fullbacks; they want to be starters. And for that reason, that's why they'll go somewhere else. So, Pat McLaughlin, if we're talking about Sirachi, we're talking about Arojo. That's my personal feeling, is they both are at a stage in their careers where they want to be playing international football, and I don't think that Arojo or Sirachi would have such a good chance of playing for Mexico or for Uruguay if they're simply the backup fullbacks at Celtic. It's not like Anthony Ralston, who gets to be one of Scotland's right backs, even though he's a backup at Celtic, or Craig Gordon gets to be a backup goalkeeper for Scotland internationally, even though he was second choice goalkeeper for Hearts, or Kelly, the Rangers goalkeeper, gets a chance to be a Scotland international, even though he's a backup. Angus Gunn gets to be a first choice goalkeeper, even though he's a backup to a backup. So, I don't think Mexico and I don't think Uruguay would want a backup at a club to be their number one, one of their fullbacks. It's just my personal opinion. Kenneth Todd, I think both Sirachi and Arojo really enjoyed their time playing for Celtic. I think they love the atmosphere. I think they love the noise. I think they love the fans. I think they love the success. They love the medals that they won at Celtic. Sirachi will have a couple of medals from the league and the cup. Arojo will get a league winners medal. So Pat McLaughlin, who do you think will win the World Cup? I honestly don't know. The one of the factors that I think has to be borne in mind is that so many of the games obviously are going to be in America, and obviously the other games are going to be in Canada and in Mexico. Particularly in Mexico and most of the venues in America, the incredible high summer heat and humidity is going to be a massive factor in terms of how well the players cope with, which would tend to give players possibly from who are native to that area, so the Americans, the Mexicans, the Canadians, but probably also gives an advantage to other Central American and South American countries, maybe the African countries as well. Tends to be a wee bit, the high heat of America and Mexico does tend to sort of factor against European sides. It's a really difficult one to say. Um, a lot of people are suggesting France have got a very good chance. I think of all the European sides, they probably have got the best chance of winning it. I have a feeling probably it's going to be one of the good South American sides who will come through, simply because of the intensity of the heat, the playing conditions, the length of the tournament, and all these factors. So, Lorden6348, are you planning on continuing the weekly streams in the close season? Yes. So my plan is to do a live stream every Thursday, right through from now, right through to the start of the season. So my plan is to do a live stream every week on a Thursday from 9 till about midnight. Now there will be an exception to that probably in a couple of weeks' time, because we're going on holiday for a week, and we might well be going on holiday again later in the summer. So apart from possibly 2 Thursdays when I'm away on holiday, the answer is yes. Now, usually when I go away on holiday, I do take my camera, my laptop, all my equipment with me. So I may do live streams when I'm away on my holidays too. I'll still be doing videos and stuff when I'm away on my holidays. But so answer the question is yes, I'm planning to do live streams all the way through the summer. So during the World Cup, still going to be doing a live stream. Mostly because we will be hopefully starting to find out who our long-term manager is going to be, or at least who our manager is going to be for next season. Hopefully we get that answered in the next 7 to 14 days. Hopefully once the transfer window starts and the pre-season starts in mid-late June, we'll start to see players coming in, players going out. So there will be lots of things to talk about. So cut a long story short, to answer the question, yes, I'm going to do live streams throughout the summer, apart from possibly not if I'm away on holiday somewhere. Gary Simpson, the World Cup will be an absolute joke in America, more breaks and ads. It's not football over there. It's a farce. Well, I don't think America's a very good place to host the World Cup. I don't think there's the prices for tickets for the World Cup in America are absolutely ridiculous. The restrictions for fans traveling to the games is ridiculous. The whole atmosphere for fans is not going to be very welcoming. I think also the fact that we've got the World Cup in 3 different venues, I'm not sure that's a tremendously good idea either. Yes. So, sorry. So, yes, I think all things considered, it was given to America for money. I think also FIFA wants to expand the game more and more into America and Central America. And I think there's an awful lot of factors why it was a bad idea to send it to America. To be fair, having a break halfway through each half for a water break, etc., is a good idea, simply for player safety, because the temperatures and the heat is going to be right up in the 80s and 90s. The air conditioning at a lot of the venues isn't like it was when they were playing in Qatar. So I think there's a lot of different factors that make it make the games in America and Mexico a very bad idea. Canada is a wee bit more cooler, a bit more of a cooler climate in general. Yep, prices are astronomical, not just for match tickets, but also taxis, public transport, food, hotels, everything. The Americans are charging an absolute fortune for absolutely everything. And unlike a lot of countries who subsidize cities and areas and stuff who are hosting World Cup games or Olympics or whatever, the American government isn't subsidizing the various different cities to help them with transport costs, hotel costs, policing, security, etc., which is part of the reason why a lot of the things that Lauren's talking about in terms of hotels, food, taxis, transport, etc., is astronomical, is because the cities aren't getting subsidized and supported by the national government, which is often the case in other countries who host the World Cup or the Olympics or the Commonwealth Games, etc., is the host city gets supported by local council and national governments to keep the prices down a wee bit. I think also the Americans, by their nature, try and make an absolute massive profit out of everything as well. And I think that's also the case within the people that run FIFA. They're all for money, they're all for maximizing profits, and they're not really for the fans, and they're not really for the players. Pat McLaughlin should have moved it to Brazil, Canada, Mexico. Well, the theory was about 9 months ago. There were moves. Six months ago, there were moves around about the end of last year about moving the World Cup to be hosted by Canada and by Mexico, and America not getting any of the games. But I think people like Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, blocked that from happening. But there were moves to take the games away from America because of the climate for immigration, the climate for security, all these various different things, and the pricing and all these other things. So there were moves apparently about 6-9 months ago to take the World Cup away from America. And there even were talks that some of the European countries were going to boycott the World Cup, France, Germany, but unfortunately, whatever, that fell through because not enough other countries. Clashman Umpty, be safer going to a World Cup in Burkina Faso. Well, I think it'd be. I really hope that it goes well for the fans, because I've got a couple of friends and relatives going out to follow Scotland in the World Cup. So I really hope that they don't have a miserable time or an awful time at airport security or immigration or any of these things, or a lot of problems when they're across in America. The fact that you have to declare 5 years of your social media profile, etc., to be allowed to go to America, it's just absolutely the visa system. Is just terrible. It's like America doesn't want any fans to come from other countries to support their players, support the other countries. And you've also got the fact that America's at war with two or three other countries are coming or have been at war recently with teams who are coming to the World Cup. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I'm afraid, Alison Timpany, I would at the moment I would have a hard job probably getting into America as well if they looked at my social media profile and the types of channels that I watch on YouTube and. Yep, tourism to the US is down by about 20%. Every country, the only country that's still sending people to America for tourism apparently is India. It's the only country in the world that has seen a drop off in tourism. The Canadians have virtually stopped going to do anything tourism wise in America. Mexicans don't go across the border for tourism reasons into America because of the hostility, and virtually every European country and Far Eastern country has stopped going to America, has massively cut down going to America as well. Things like Disney World and all those things are really, really struggling. So Classman Umpty, they've stopped visas for Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Brazil. Any decent world body would stop it. Infantino is a Trump fan. Yes, well, obviously there are also problems, obviously, for the Iranian players to get into America, the Iraqi players to get into America, the players from Haiti getting into America, the players coming from Democratic Republic of Congo. There's about half a dozen countries where there are massive restrictions on the visas for anyone to get into the country. Now, Iran's actually now apparently going to be staying in Mexico, but playing in America for the games. Quite what's happening to the players, the fans from Haiti, because Haiti is on a no-go list for Americans in terms of visas. So it's just awful. Paradise Huddle. Hopefully we do 6 in a row next season, and hopefully we do 7 in a row, and 8 in a row, and then 9 in a row, and then 10 in a row, and hopefully I'm still here in 10 years' time, and we're talking about 15 in a row, etc. As I said a wee bit earlier on, I'm not convinced personally that Hearts are going to be any better next season than they were this season. I think much like how Leicester were after they won the title under Claudio Ranieri, they went down and down and down and down. Leicester, they certainly were. Did Leicester get relegated from the Championship, or did they hold on in the Championship? Can't remember. But it's same if you think also a bit further back to Blackburn. Blackburn at one point were English Premier League champions, doing well in Europe. And then they went down and down and down, got relegated into the English Championship. They've been stuck there for years and years and years. So I don't think Hearts will be as strong next season as they were this season. I think this was their one and only chance to win the league. I think Hearts are going to lose their better players. They've already lost Shankland. Strong rumours that Cammy Devlin's going to be going as well. Wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Braga and Kiziridis are also moved on. So I can personally see unless their transfer recruitment model is brilliant, I can't see them being better next season than they were this season. I think, as I say, I think they're going to go backwards. Quite how Rangers are next season, I don't know. I think if Rangers are sensible with their finances, which is what they claim they're going to be, they're probably going to have to sell 3 or 4 players before they can buy 3 or 4 new players. And also, with Shankland coming to the club, it does actually create difficulties for players like Chermiti, Nadieri, and Miovski, because presumably Shankland will be the number 1 choice as Rangers' main striker for next season, which then does put players like Chermiti, Nadieri, and Miovski down to 2, 3, and 4. And I don't see Bojan Miovski being happy to be the number 4 striker at Rangers. So Gary Simpson predicting Hearts to be 3rd or 4th next season. I can certainly see that. I think next season Celtic will be the champions. I suspect next season Rangers probably will be the runners up. You could certainly see You could certainly see Hibs doing better next season. Got a feeling that Falkirk won't so much fall away. I think they'll probably be mid-table. You wonder about teams maybe like Aberdeen, Dundee United might come good again next season. I have a strong feeling that Motherwell's probably going to fall away next season with the loss of their manager. I think they'll also start losing some of their better players. Perry 840. I'm generally good with both Hearts and excuse me, Rangers keeping McInnes and Sausage Roll. That certainly seems to be the intention. I don't think Hearts would want to lose Derek McInnes, but much like with Lawrence Shankland, I think Derek McInnes, sooner as there's a better offer from a bigger club, he'll be off. I don't think he's got any loyalty of any sort to Hearts. I think he's got quite a lot of power in terms of how the team is at Hearts. I wouldn't be too surprised actually if over the summer Danny Roll actually ends up going back to Germany. There were rumours of a couple of German teams looking to sign him to be their manager for next season. It does appear that Rangers have given him the vote of confidence. I'm not massively convinced that Danny Roll's a particularly good manager, a particularly good tactician. He seems also to get under the skin of quite a lot of these players. Obviously, the way that he handled the James Tavernier end of his career at Rangers, I think, went badly wrong. I think there's quite a lot of players in the Rangers squad who are not happy with their role in the team under Danny Roll. And I think one of the really difficult things to do, which is something O'Neill did a very good job with, far better than Nancy and Rodgers did, is keeping players happy in the squad and keeping the players happy playing for the club. Michael Ross saying Motherwell will get relegated. The thing is, it's possible. Motherwell have done a great job of always, kind of hanging on. They haven't been relegated for a long time. They do kind of alternate between being top six and bottom six, but they're never really in danger down at 11th or 12th. One of the difficulties that Motherwell's going to have is keeping hold of players like Masmanisi, Elijah Just, Callum Ward, the goalkeeper, Longello and Sparrow, the overlapping fullbacks. So I think their problem is going to be is that keeping hold of the players that have done well from this season, and then also getting a new manager who keeps on taking them forwards. But again, I don't see Motherwell being such a powerful team next season unless they do a particularly good job in terms of recruiting a new manager and keeping the bulk of that squad together. I dare say they probably do have quite a lot of money in the bank, which is unusual for Motherwell. From the Lennon Miller transfer, they've probably got a big compensation package from Ascu going off to French football. So they maybe do have enough money to reward the Elijah Justs and the Masmanizis, etc., to keep them at the club a bit longer. Yes, Diamandi's not very happy. Raskin's not been very happy at Rangers. John Suter apparently is not very happy at Rangers. Same Miovski is supposedly lining up a move away from Rangers now that he's going to be behind Tremiti and Shankland in the pecking order. So Lorden saying that Raskin's not popular with the Rangers fans. He certainly has clashed with just about every manager he's ever had. He was a bit more pally with Philippe Clement, his fellow Belgian, but he certainly fell out with Russell Martin. He's fallen out with Danny Rowe. I think he is when he's playing football, just like Diamandi, he's quite an abrasive player, quite in your face as well. So I think probably he's much the same off the pitch as well, and he certainly seems to have annoyed quite a lot of his fellow players and managers and stuff. So I wouldn't be too surprised if Raskin's one of the players who leaves over the summer. Tremiti also, I suspect, with Shankland coming in to be the number one striker, I don't think Tremiti is going to be very likely to want to stay there any longer either. Yep, Wyoming CSC. I think Lafferty would be one of the least popular players. Never really forgiven him for getting Alan Thompson sent off and getting Charlie Mulgrew sent off when Charlie Mulgrew was playing for Aberdeen by feigning having been headbutted. Both times the player got a red card. The red card then got rescinded by the disciplinary people, and then Lafferty got given a couple of matches of a ban for both those, pretending to be injured. I don't like players who take a dive. I don't like players who pretend to be injured. I don't like players who like to get other players in trouble and so on. So I don't like, and I think it implies you're not a particularly nice person. Anyway. I think we can probably agree that there are very, very few Rangers players over the years that are very popular with Celtic fans. And there are quite a lot of them who have been particularly annoying or and I think we're naming quite a lot of the ones that people didn't like. Nacho Novo, Diamandi, as I say, Kyle Lafferty, I really did not like him at all. Didn't like John Lundstrom. Don't like quite a lot of the Rangers players, I say. Elhaj Diouf, awful player. What's his name? Alfredo Morelos, another really annoying, sneaky, dirty player. Again, another player who was forever diving, pretending to be injured, forever also kicking people, punching players. You think, oh, what's his name as well? Ryan, whatever his, can't remember that the ex-Liverpool player. Was it Ryan Kent? Ryan, yeah, whatever. He was another one that I really didn't like because of the feigning of injury. Got a wee bit more respect for players like Raskin, Diamandi, etc., who are naturally quite dirty, aggressive players. Got a wee bit more sympathy for that sorts of player. Anyway. So Lauren, Ryan Kent, again, feigning injury, punched Scott Brown, got away with it. Anyway. Yes, Kenneth Todd, Scott Brown did deal with Kent and Morelos and quite a lot of other players, and again that bit of midfield aggression and a bit of having a midfield enforcer, something Celtic have lost in recent seasons. Callum McGregor really doesn't fit the bill. We think back a wee bit of time, we had Lennon, Lambert, Brown, Victor Wanyama, even people like Nir Beaton could certainly land a tackle and so on as well. Which was one of the great things about Arojo and Sirachi, where they were both players who were on the front foot. They both enjoyed a tackle. They both enjoyed a confrontation, and I liked both. If Sirachi and Arojo were happy to come to Celtic and be backup players behind the two first choices, I would be delighted if they come back. But my suspicion is, as much as we would want them to come back, I suspect that they would prefer to be first choices elsewhere rather than backups at Celtic. Just one wee thing wanted to have a chat about, see what other people think. Just give me a second to see if I can get this up. So obviously, a couple of days ago, Kasper Schmeichel announced that he was retiring from all football at the age of 39. So he'll be retiring as a Celtic player because his contract with Celtic runs out around about the end of May, the start of June. So he's apparently had one shoulder operation. He was due to have a second and a third shoulder operation, but the shoulder specialist said that he was never going to be able to get back to being a top-level goalkeeper. And so not too unexpectedly, having been told you're not going to get back to being a top-level goalkeeper, especially if you're 39, 40 years old, he's decided to retire. So he had particularly in his first season for Celtic, he had a really good first season for Celtic. A lot of clean sheets in his first season for Celtic. Had a rather patchy season for Celtic this season. I think there were several games where he made mistakes that cost Celtic goals, that cost them draws and cost them defeats. So in the sort of final third of the season, Viljami Sinisalo was our first choice goalkeeper. Did play 20 games for Celtic at the end of the season. So the question is whether Viljami Sinisalo deserves to be our first choice goalkeeper going into next season, or whether Celtic should look to bring in another first choice goalkeeper, and Sinisalo goes back to being second choice. I think he's done enough to at least start the season as the number one choice. However, I do think Celtic should get another goalkeeper somewhere in the region of 23 to 27 years old, ideally with experience playing in a big European league, maybe experience also playing in European football, such as the Europa League, Champions League, etc. I do think it's always great to have two first choice goalkeepers. Actually, it's a good idea to have two first choice players for every position. That way, if players get injured, suspended, lose form, you've got someone just as good or even better to come in and replace them. So Lorden saying he seems like a good character, very loud, animated, communicates well with the defence, clearly loves the club. I think all those things are true. I think his ability to come for crosses, command his 6-yard box is better than Kasper Schmeichel's. I thought generally Celtic's defending of corners and free kicks and long throws into the box was better when Sinisalo came in to be the goalkeeper, whether that was Celtic working hard behind the scenes to work better for those defending those things. But under Rodgers and under Nancy, Celtic were terrible defending long throws, corners, high balls, free kicks into the box. We conceded so many goals to headers with those things, or the second ball from those things. You think about the goals that St Mirren scored against us in the League Cup final, the goals that Dundee United scored against us in the 2-1 defeat around about Christmas time, and tons and tons of examples. Particularly Hearts exploited us in the first 3 games of the season, not so much in the 4th game, because I think Sinisalo and the defence defended far better at corners. Having said that, of course, they did score from a corner. So great to have you on, Gordon Flowers, all the way from Sydney. Yep, I think Sinisalo, mid-20s, he's going to get better and better. He's already played about half a dozen games for Finland at full international level. I think he's going to get better and better. I think also one of the difficulties that maybe Sinisalo had was coming into play with a back 4 he hadn't played with very much before. Obviously, there was a bit of changing at right back position, particularly all season. There was relative stability with Trusty and Scales in front of him, relative stability with Tierney on the left, or Sriracha on the left. But and I think someone was talking about the near goal that Celtic gave up to Dunfermline early in the game. That looked like a miscommunication between Alistair Johnston and Viljami Sinisalo. Remembering, up until a couple of weeks before, Sinisalo had never played in a team with Alistair Johnston as his right back. So I think if the pre-season goes well, a lot of these communications and partnerships and links between all the various different people in the back 4 and the goalkeeper will start to get better and better. So I would go with Sinisalo as being our number 1 next season. However, Ernest Mosley, I'm not convinced about Sinisalo. Like the Motherwell keeper, good shot stopper, excellent distribution, better passer than some outfield players. I think Callum Ward has a lot of good things to about him as well. I'm not convinced. The difficulty of any player coming from a smaller club where you're not under the microscope and not under pressure, coming to play for Celtic is you have to you're straight away. Everything you do is all around the world. So if you're goalkeeper for Motherwell, some of your games are on TV, some of your games are shown all around the world, but pretty much every single Celtic game, one way or another, is shown all around the world. Massive microscope. Every single error you make is dissected by 20 different journalists and pundits and ex-players and stuff. So I think the pressure of playing for Celtic is way higher than it is for any other club in Scotland apart from Rangers. Yeah, because you also have massive scrutiny for playing for Rangers as well. So Michael Ross being, hopefully facetious and sarcastic about Kasper Schmeichel being flogged. I presume we're talking about the Aberdeen defeat last year, not this year's cup final. But I do agree that I think what really is the answer regarding Kasper Schmeichel is that Celtic's managers, Rodgers, O'Neill, Nancy, should have done a far better job of managing him. The goalkeeping coach, Stevie Wood, should have done a far better managing job of him. And the medical people, physios, etc., should have done a far better job of managing his shoulder injury. And I think all those factors didn't come together as a good team. And I think what it really required was somebody within Celtic's hierarchy at the start of summer of 2025, the end of the 2 seasons, the end of the 24-25 season, start of the 25-26 season, should have said that Schmeichel should have been sent for an operation on his shoulder at that point, which would have been a simpler operation with much less damage to correct. and I'm pretty sure he would have been back in line to play by October, November, December at the latest, and then he would have had a full 6 months for Celtic and 6 months to play for Denmark leading up to the World Cup. So I think his shoulder injury was mismanaged by the footballing people and the physio medical people as well. Okay. Kasper Kostas points. I think Kasper Schmeichel made some great saves for Celtic over the course of the season. He made a couple of really good saves against Falkirk in the game that we won 1-0 in the rain on the plastic pitch. He made a couple of really great saves against Hearts in the game that ended 2-2. He did, of course, make quite a lot of errors that cost us goals as well. The Braga goal, that long distance one was poor. The second one in the Bologna game, that was a poor one as well. He was at fault for 3 of the 4 goals against Stuttgart in the game that we lost. I thought was at fault for 2 or 3 of the goals that we lost to Rangers in the 3-1 defeat in January. He had a particular problem diving onto his left shoulder, which is understandable because that was his injured shoulder. And he had a particular problem coming for high balls into the box. That cost us against St Mirren in the League Cup final. It cost us partly in the Motherwell defeat between Christmas and New Year, when he failed to come for a high ball into the box that the Motherwell player scored with a header. So I think with Kasper Schmeichel, it was swings and roundabouts. I think I read somewhere that Celtic conceded 7 more goals than they should have last season, which was one of these stats that they go with the quality. The statisticians go with the quality of chances that you miss and the quality of chances that the opposition had, and they work out the XG for and the XG against. I've never properly understood it, but the suggestion was that Celtic should have scored 20 more goals last season than they did, given the number of chances they missed, and should have conceded 7 less goals, given the quality of chances the opposition managed to get past us. Just give me a second. So, Clashman Numpty, who's responsible for allowing him to play? That's a very good question. I would suspect in the end it was down to Rodgers, Nancy, and O'Neill as to whether Schmeichel played or didn't play. And I dare say that all those 3 managers were relying on good information from the physios, good information from the goalkeeping coach Stevie Woods, good information from Kasper Schmeichel himself, and also if we could see the fact that Schmeichel seemed to have a particular problem diving to his left quite often and seemed to have a particular problem coming for high balls quite often, maybe Rodgers, Nancy, and O'Neill should have addressed it far better and not played them and tried to force them into some form of surgery or extended physical rehabilitation, both of which might have worked with Schmeichel's injury. But it probably would have meant a spell of 3 or 4 months out of the game. And if 6 weeks of that could have been over the summer holidays last summer, that would have made things even better. Yep, Lauren, I completely agree. That's my thought as well. The medics, the physio, the goalkeeping coach, the player, the managers, all at fault, which tends to be the case with when things go wrong, be it in a football club, a school, a business, a hospital, or whatever. It tends not to be one person's fault. It tends to be 4 or 5 different cogs in the same machine. And sometimes what it really requires to correct those sorts of faults, which are more systemic and more organizational, is one person standing up and taking control, and which often in a football club would be the first team head coach, the first team manager. So Rodgers, Nancy, or O'Neill, and say, Schmeichel's not saving shots he should be saving. Why is that? And really coming, really, and taking the difficult decision to drop Kasper Schmeichel and send him off either for extended physical rehabilitation for his shoulder, or more likely at that time a more minor shoulder surgery, which could well have gotten back to playing first team football quickly. The fact that it was going to require 3 operations in 1 year out of football to get him back playing after the Stuttgart re-injury. Oops. Kenneth Todd, the difficulty is we like everything at Celtic, and like everything actually at pretty much every football club, no one quite knows what does or doesn't get said behind the scenes. So I don't think there's, and I'm not sure what the evidence is to say that Kasper Schmeichel wasn't being truthful, any more than Callum McGregor playing through the pain with his Achilles tendon calf problem. In that several games this season, Callum McGregor was struggling. Apparently, in the Aberdeen game that we ended up winning 2-1 midweek, McGregor was really, really struggling with his calf leading into that game and throughout that game. And then subsequently missed a couple of games after that. So I'm not sure what the evidence is that Kasper Schmeichel was or wasn't being. Alison Timpany must have had a shoulder like a pincushion, all the magic miracle injections they got. And again, getting recurring steroid and pain-killing injections into a joint is really, really pretty painful. I know that from own personal experience, having had it on 2 occasions with my knee when I was younger. It's not a nice thing to have happen to you. It's really pretty painful. And remembering lots and lots and lots of football players in the 60s, 70s, and 80s who had tons and tons of injections into their knees, particularly, and then they were having knee replacements at the age of 40, 45, because of the number of steroid injections they'd had into their knees. So, and it's mostly Kasper was obviously asked if he's all right to play, and the manager took his word. Well, I don't know what other people's fields of work is, but as a manager, be it a manager of a football team or a manager or a school teacher or a lawyer or a doctor or a nurse or a business person or working in a shop, if you are the person in charge, you have to use your own eyes and say, he says he's okay, but his performance is not okay. Thus, I'm going to take the decision not to play him because he's clearly not, even though he says he's fit enough to play, he's not fit enough to play. So as a manager in football clubs or in any realm or any job role that you care to have, if you're the manager, you have to take these difficult decisions sometimes, even if a player says they're okay or an employee says they're coping okay. You have to use your own experience, your own brains, your own eyes, your own mind to make the decision. Anyway. Gordon Flower, I think your comment there, I think when you have a player at the stature of Kasper, it's hard to drop them. I think that's equally true. That equally true with Callum McGregor. I think his role as the captain of the club, his role as the linchpin of the midfield, the linchpin of the passing team, completely, totally, 100% true. So dropping Schmeichel, very, very difficult. Dropping Callum McGregor, very, very difficult. Dropping Dyson Maida, very, very difficult. The hope, as it came to pass with Dyson Maida, I can't remember how many games in a row he played. He didn't score, but it was something like from early January through to maybe April. He had like the best part of 3 months where he didn't score at all. Incredible long spell of games where Dyson Maida didn't score, and eventually O'Neill kept faith with him, changed his position now and again, and Dyson Maida scored 7 goals in the last 5 games of the of the season. So Dyson Maida, so O'Neill persisted with Maida despite the fact that he wasn't scoring goals. And eventually it very much came good for Celtic. 7 goals in the last 5 games of the season, of the league, plus he scored in the cup final. So it all really worked out fine. Michael Ross, could you tell us, David, is it Kasper with a C or Kasper with a K? So it's Kasper with a K. And I think you're also saying that because you're implying, you're misspelling the words folk and no. Anyway. So it's Kasper with a K rather than Kasper with a C. Anyway, I thought Kasper Schmeichel, particularly in his first season, was a very good goalkeeper for Celtic. I think he was quite a big factor in us winning the title the season before the last season that just finished. I think he had obviously was struggling with injury throughout the first 2/3 of the 25-26 season. And as my opinion was, we should have done something. A Celtic Football Club should have done something to treat his shoulder injury properly last spring when it happened, and particularly over the summer. I think that would have, and I think Sinosala would have been good enough to step up and be Celtic's number 1, even just temporarily for covering for Schmeichel being out for 3-4 months or so. Yep, Gordon Flowers, guessing Martin had a word with Dyson and said, you can't go out like this, and changed his attitude, and then Dyson kicked on for us. As I was speculating a wee bit earlier on at the start, I did also wonder that Dyson Maida's return to form particularly was after the last international break. So in the last international break, Japan were playing 2 games in Britain. They played against England down at Wembley, I think it was, but they also played Scotland on that tour as well. Dyson Maida played a lot of the first game against Scotland and played as the captain to start with. Then he got subbed off. He didn't play at all in the England games. I do wonder whether the Japanese management and coaches and stuff kind of gave him an ultimatum that his World Cup squad place was in jeopardy. So I do think probably Gordon Flowers, it was a mixture of Martin O'Neill reassuring and building up Dyson Maida's confidence, and maybe also Dyson Maida wanting to go out with a bang as a Celtic player, but also getting back into the good books of the Japanese international manager. And it is thought that Dyson Maida will be quite a key part of the Japanese squad for this upcoming World Cup, because he is 28, 29, so he may be struggling to have another World Cup after this. Anyway. So, Clashman Numpty, any manager lotto news? So right at the start of the live stream, there was quite a lot of speculation and some stories that Robbie Keane had been seen in London with some Celtic associated people. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. He certainly has resigned as manager of Ferencváros in Hungary. My personal feeling is that Robbie Keane's more likely to end up managing either in America or in England. I don't personally think that he would be coming to be Celtic's manager next. Now, I read a headline that implied that Stevie Clarke, the current Scotland manager, has signed a 4-year extension with Scotland, so he's out the frame. There's not been any Roberto Martinez hasn't made any kind of comment regarding what his plans are for after the World Cup. Anyway, it's quite. So, Clashman Umpty, personally, he'd rather have Robbie Williams or Robbie Savage as new Celtic manager. The problem with everything in Celtic world at the moment is because Celtic, like virtually every football club in the world, aren't very transparent at sharing inside knowledge, inside news. Anyway, so there appear to be quite a lot of rather non-Celtic, non-family friendly stuff going on with one particular person in the live stream chat. I've tried to give him a chance to calm down and stop being so non-Celtic like and non-family friendly. So that person's comments and stuff should now be frozen off of the channel. Sorry, apologies for, as I always try with everybody, I do try and give everybody a chance to calm down, realize that they're not being very popular, that they're maybe being rather rude, rather controversial. Particularly don't like things which have a racial hatred bias to them or homophobia or all these kind of things. Anyway, so I do apologize for that. I did try to give the person a chance, as I've only actually ever excluded one other person, and again that was for the same sorts of things, some rather horrible religious bigotry and some rather really horrible personal insults towards me. So So, Gary Simpson, thank you very much for saying I don't have to apologise for half-wits. Well, I do feel, because I am the moderator, and I do have to try and keep things pleasant and polite and stuff. But I do also quite like having debate and stuff. And up until this week, my memory of that particular person was a lot of his comments were really quite good and insightful and part of the general discussion and argument. I'm not quite sure what's annoyed him or what set him off this week. But anyway, things got beyond. All right, okay. Michael Ross, I say that if he's got other names, well, maybe he'll come back under a different name and behave himself. Anyway, let's talk about football things. Yeah, sorry. So manager-wise, so the story was that, that for as far as I can read, was that O'Neill and Dermot Desmond and Michael Nicholson and so on were supposed to be having a meeting around about now, Wednesday, Thursday. That's been postponed until next week. Now, somebody made a really good comment. I can't remember, it was right at the start, that the reason that the talks between Dermot Desmond and Martin Neil, etc., being postponed for a week was to give Martin Neil a week to get his thoughts in order, to maybe chat with his wife and daughters, to chat with other friends and family, maybe chat with some of the people who backed him up at Celtic, so McManus, Fotheringham, Maloney, Strachan, etc., to maybe come to a conclusion as to whether he does feel he's got the physical and mental energy to carry on doing this for another year. In terms of other candidates for the job, Robbie Keane is definitely one that's a lot of people have talked about. Craig Bellamy, that's come back into focus, although there's a feeling that Craig Bellamy is more likely to be managing a team in the English Championship rather than coming to Celtic. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Stevie Clark was rumoured, but then that seems to have gone by the wayside, because I think he's been signed by Scotland for 4 years. Roberto Martinez remains a name a lot of people are putting forward. The other name that seems to have come back into focus is Kieran McKenna, the manager of Ipswich. Now, he did get Ipswich promoted back to the English Premier League. Whether he wants to have another season in England fighting against relegation and probably getting relegated again this time like they did 2 seasons ago, another matter. So there are some people saying that Kieran McKenna would be quite open to coming to manage Celtic. Now, that might be this summer, or it might be more likely the summer after, summer of 2027, assuming that Ipswich don't stay up in the English Premier League, which is a strong likelihood. So, yes, Gary Simpson. Now, I did read that O'Neill was across at some kind of sort of supporters club or footballing thing in Northern Ireland. So, and it may also be that O'Neill had a number of media commitments and stuff as well. He obviously still has had some input on talk radio. He's still obviously quite involved with the League Managers Association. He's become part of their 1,000 game club of managers. And so there was something regarding that as well. Really interesting, Lauren. I've never seen any stories like that. It's entirely possible given all the politics and social factors, etc. So saying McKenna's family's got a successful business in Northern Ireland and he wouldn't touch a Glasgow club because of the impact on them. I've never read that. I've never read that or heard that, but it could well be true. I don't discount anything ever being not true. Now, my understanding was 12 months ago or so, there was speculation that Kieran McKenna was would be quite up to coming to Celtic if he failed to get Ipswich back into the Premier League, which of course would have been this summer coming rather than when Nancy was appointed. I'm sorry, Ernest Mosley, if I ever get anything politically incorrect, it's just because I'm Scottish. And I don't mean anything by any comments. It's not. I've not got any politics in the game. So I apologise if inadvertently I ever say the wrong thing regarding Northern Ireland, North of Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Ireland, etc. So I do apologise. Yes, so where were we? So, Pat McLaughlin, to answer your question, did Scales play tonight for Ireland? The answer to that is he's played on the left side of midfield. So, Ireland were playing a 3-4-2-1, and he was playing as basically a left-sided midfield player, presumably sort of a wing-back role more than a left midfield role as such. But they had a back three: O'Brien, Collins, and O'Shea, with Coleman and Scales sort of as wing-back wide midfielders, two defensive midfielders, two attacking midfielders, and a striker. And Ireland won by 1-0, even though they had a player sent off. So did Qatar. So that's the answer to that question. Yes, Scales played today. He played as a sort of wing-back, wide midfielder type of role. Clashman Numpty, Player of the Year. Well, the channels. So there was a poll on the channel a couple of weeks ago for a couple of weeks that finished at the time of the cup final. The player voted as Player of the Year was Benjamin Negrin, with Kieran Tierney in second place, which is pretty much the same as what ended up being the official Celtic Football Club Player of the Year and Supporters Association Player of the Year. So Benjamin Negrin was the Player of the Year on the channel, and Player of the Year amongst the players, and Player of the Year amongst the fans who voted for it on the okay. Champions League qualifying game is in mid-August and the end of August. Just a wee second, see if I can find this. So to answer your question, Gordon Flowers, the first leg of the final qualifier is on the 18th or 19th of August. Second leg is on the 25th and the 26th of August. So much the same as it was last summer when we had Kairat Almaty home and away with 1 week in between times. We don't quite know who we're going to be playing in that round. We do know that we're seeded, so we theoretically should get a slightly easier game in that round. But obviously, there are 3 rounds before that, so there are quite a lot of different teams that we could play in that round. Although we do know we won't be playing Lech Poznan, Red Star Belgrade, Dinamo Zagreb, or Slovan Bratislava, because they are all seeded into that round as well. So we do know that we're not playing any of those teams. So, answer your question, the 18th or 19th of August for the first leg, and then the second leg is 7 days later. Our difficulty is that quite a lot of the clubs will be playing, 18th to 19th August. So, Pat McLaughlin got the answer there. So Lauren's got saying PSG or Arsenal on Saturday. Hope it's PSG. I would personally like Paris Saint-Germain to win. Not a big fan of Arsenal. My brother-in-law is a lifelong Arsenal fan. So for his sake, I'd quite like Arsenal to win the Champions League. But Arsenal's never been really a favorite team of mine. In all the time I've been supporting Scottish football and English football. Good point, Ernest. Mostly, Arsenal did used to have a strong history of Scottish players and Irish players both from both Northern Ireland or north of Ireland and Ireland, with people like Pat Jennings, obviously. So they did have a lot of different players of Scottish and Irish nationality. Clashman Numpty, do we get a home tie first? Like, I think it's drawn on the 3rd of August whether you're home and away in the first leg. I don't think the seeded club automatically gets home leg second time around, because last year we played Kira Almaty home first and away second, when in theory in a two-legged tie you want to play your second leg at home rather than at first leg at home. And in virtually all the other European games where there's a draw, the home team gets to have the second leg at home. You think about against Bayern Munich 2 seasons ago, or Stuttgart in the season just ended, because Celtic were the lower ranked side. We got home leg first and away leg second. But I think for that particular qualifier round, it's a draw on the day into which side they get the. So Pat McLaughlin, Viking could be the worst draw at Celtic again. I think, given the fact that Viking are the team that won the Norwegian League, i.e. they pushed Bodø Glimt down into second place, does imply that Viking must be a good strong side, because they were able to beat Bodø Glimt not just over one game in a season to win a cup final, but they were able to beat Bodø Glimt over a whole long Norwegian season, home and away, and playing into all the other good teams in Norway. I think AEK Athens is another team who are liable to be on the other side of the draw, who could be strong. I think in essence we just take who we get when it comes round. So I think basically when the draw for that part is the 3rd of August, which is just a day or two after the Scottish season starts for the 26-27 season, we'll see who we're in the draw. We do know that we will be seeded, which means that we theoretically do have a stronger leg. It does mean that we should avoid the teams who are that bit stronger or have a better pedigree in European football. So the Red Star Belgrades, the Slovan Bratislavas, Lech Poznan of Poland, etc., all are that bit stronger in theory. Dinamo Zagreb, who we drew with in the Europa League last season. And so, okay, so getting back to the question that Clashman Numpty, do you think the World Cup rules out Martinez? I think it probably does, because one would guess that Portugal's probably going to be involved into the later rounds of the World Cup. So they're going to be involved with probably well into July. Probably not getting all the way to the final, but you wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they get to last 16, last 8, that kind of level. So I don't think so, unless the arrangement is that Sean Maloney is going to be in charge of everything until Martinez gets back from the World Cup, and that Martinez and Maloney are in contact by email and text and phone calls and Zoom and Skype and all these other things. I think it probably does rule out Martinez. There was a theory put forward by one of the other people who's been with the channel right from the start, a guy called St Mary's Parish, Coatbridge. He said he'd heard that the plan that Celtic were going for was Martin O'Neill to remain manager for 12 months, and then Roberto Martinez taking over in the summer of 2027 to be the Celtic manager, with Sean Maloney being a bridge between that O'Neill year and then carrying on with Martinez. So Gary Simpson, I wouldn't want Martinez anyways. I just don't think he's a quality manager, not for me. Well, I think he certainly has been, he certainly was a very successful manager with Belgium, took them high up in various different competitions. Admittedly, didn't win anything with Belgium. He similarly took over with Portugal. He's taken them to the late stages of several tournaments. One could argue that he had particularly good, strong players at Belgium. In the Belgian squad, he's got good, strong players in the Portuguese squad. He was relatively successful as a manager of Everton, although never won anything with Everton. But then to win anything with Everton these days is practically impossible. So anyway, the thing one would be getting with Martinez definitely is a manager with lots and lots of experience. And he's also able to manage players and he's managed some of the best players in European football over the last 10 years or so. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Sorry, Clashman, I'm not sure if you're disagreeing with me or disagreeing with somebody else, but I think the benefits of Roberto Martinez is he's worked with world-class footballers, the Kevin De Bruyne's, the Cristiano Ronaldo's, but lots and lots of really good quality, high-quality players. He's worked with players in both countries where he's had to choose between two superstars to play a particular position. I think he, particularly at Belgium, he was quite a big factor at Belgium, along with Sean Maloney, in bringing through quite a lot of young, very talented players from under-21 football into their first team, and then blending them with the more experienced players. Because he wasn't just successful with Belgium over 1 or 2 years, he was successful with them through European nations and World Cup cycles, back into European nations and World Cup cycles. And he's done the same at Portugal. So I do think he's worked with world-class players. I think that brings something. His ties with Sean Maloney is also Gary Simpson, I completely see with virtually everybody who's out there to be a possible Celtic manager, there's pros and there's cons. There's good bits and not so good bits. I think a lot of people were sceptical when Martin O'Neill was given the caretaker job back in October. I think a lot of folk thought he had been out of managing football for 6 or 7 years, that he actually wasn't a very after leaving Celtic in 2005, his club years at Villa, Sunderland and Notts Forest weren't very good at all. Yep. So one could argue that after leaving Celtic in 2005, O'Neill's career as a club manager and then international manager, it was okay, but it wasn't particularly good. It certainly didn't reach the levels like he had done at Leicester before coming to Celtic, and particularly at Celtic. So Pat McLaughlin saying you could argue that Belgium should have done a lot better with that lot. That was their golden generation. Well, then you could equally argue that about the various England men's sides as well, which had some really superstar players, but never quite achieved anything at European level or at World Cup level. I think probably what he achieved with Belgium and what he's achieved with Portugal might be kind of the limits. I think for Belgium to win the World Cup would be very difficult. I think similarly for Portugal, winning the European nations, I think for both those would have been much more likely. So one could argue he's not won anything as an international manager. One could also argue that he's think he's won one trophy, which was with Wigan, their one and only trophy. So anyway, to answer the question, which was from Clashman Umpty, do I think it counts Martinez out of being Celtic's manager this summer? I would say yes. And the fact that Kjetil Knutsen has started a new season with Bodø Glimt a few weeks ago, again, that would suggest to me that he is planning to stay at Bodø Glimt and to see whether he can achieve the same sorts of success in the Champions League this season coming. Although they'll be going through a different path, they'll be going through the runners-up pathway, not the champions pathway. So they'll actually have probably a harder job qualifying because they'll be going through the same pathway that Hearts are going to go through, and the same pathway that Rangers failed to get through last time. And there actually are probably some much stronger sides in that pathway that Bodø Glimt have got to navigate through to get into the Champions League. So probably it was actually easier last season for them to get through qualifying to get into the Champions League than it would be this season, having come second to Viking Stavanger. Alison Timoney, glad Arnie's not going, to be honest, just recovering from injury, or is that selfish to me? I think if there was a strong chance that Arnie Engels was going to be staying at Celtic, I think him having a summer off, as he will be now, would be excellent for him. I think, unfortunately, he's going to be going off to the English Premier League or going off to Spain or France or Germany or somewhere like that. I don't think we'll have him next season. And I'm not sure whose question it was, but I think the reason that Nico Raskin got in ahead of Arnie Engels in terms of the Belgian squad was partly due to the fact that Engels had a couple of spells out this season, just ended with injury. Because at one point Engels was in the squad and Raskin wasn't in the squad. Engels got injured, was out for a few weeks, and then Raskin got in to the next international squad and then stayed in it. And then, of course, Engels then got himself re-injured early in 2026. So Clashman Umpty suggesting we're going to get Mike Bassett as the manager. No. I think as things stand, I think Martin O'Neill has the first refusal as to whether he becomes the next Celtic manager or carries on as the Celtic manager or not. Great to have you on, San Fan Celtic. All the Hearts fans are raging that Shanklin didn't get a kicking. Well, it certainly, to me, it actually it doesn't say an awful lot for me for the personality and the honourability of Lawrence Shankland, for him to be captain of Hearts one day and then 7 days later he's getting a free transfer to go off and go and play for Rangers. And also, it does suggest to me, again, it's another reason I don't think Hearts will be so strong next season. In that I think retaining players is going to be a difficulty for them next season, much more than it is for Celtic retaining players. I think Celtic can and already are paying players well above what any other club in Scotland is paying them. We can't pay as much as many of the clubs in England and most of the clubs in mainland Europe. do, because simply we don't have the TV money or the prize money or the sponsorship money that the English leagues, the Italians and the Germans and the Spanish and the French do. So it's difficult for Celtic to challenge those clubs in those countries who've got such they've got $1 billion TV contracts, not tens of millions of pounds worth of TV contracts. Lovely to have you on, Rubber Duck 67. So San Fran's saying, Celtic saying, too bad Jamestown Analytics doesn't do contracts. It certainly sounds an extremely odd contract, basically to say to Lawrence Shankland, here's a big pay rise for you to stay at Hearts. Well, you'll carry on being the first choice centre forward. You'll carry on being the captain of the club, but we're going to put into your contract a clause which means you can leave the club for absolutely nothing next summer. Or in any time in the next 3 years, if you want to go to another club. So really, really strange contract that Hearts gave Lawrence Shankland. They would probably have been far better just getting rid of him 2 summers ago, rather than giving him such a contract that was so beneficial to him and actually very much goes against Hearts' interests. And I don't think when Hearts play Rangers next season that he'll be terribly popular at Tynecastle. Going back there, I don't think he'll get a hero's welcome when he goes back to Tynecastle next year, or next season rather, later on this year. And also really thought there's been two or three news stories that said that Shankland's going to be leading the line for Scotland in the World Cup. I'd be very, very surprised if Shankland's anything more than the second striker off the bench. Pretty sure it's going to be Dykes or Che Adams as the starter, with the other one being the one who comes off the bench first. I don't think Shankland's actually going to be there as anything more than the backup to the backup. Yep, you make an interesting point. Wyoming CSC, Lampard and Gerrard never worked together playing for England. And I think that's one of the difficulties of trying to get lots of players who are big star names playing together as a good 11 players, which we come back to Roberto Martinez. He clearly was able to do that when he was managing the Belgium international team, bringing together lots and lots of very famous players, big star names, and getting them all to play together. Same way that he's done taking over as manager of Portugal. Very few bigger names in the world of football than Cristiano Ronaldo, and he's managed to merge Cristiano Ronaldo into a team of younger players, mixing younger players, older players, much like he did with Belgium. And so there is a certain talent. I think if you have got 2 players as talented as Lampard and Gerrard and Scholes and all these other players that England had, to get them all playing together, and several England managers failed to do that. Martinez seemed to be able to do that with the Belgian squad and the Portuguese squad. San Fran Celtic 7570. Any pre-season tours set up for Celtic this summer? Haven't seen anything confirmed as to where Celtic are going on their pre-season tours. Did see some mention that Celtic were hoping to get AC Milan to come to Celtic for a friendly in the pre-season. Not sure whether that's just a friendly whether that was going to be as part of some kind of sort of four-way tournament that sometimes you do over the course of a long weekend. Not sure if it's for somebody's testimonial. So Ernest mostly saying Celtic should create an analytics department, hire a number country to identify players to look at. Manager has to have the final say, though. I think the thing to say actually is under Ange Postecoglou, for definitely, we did have that sort of system. We had a department which did do number crunching and analysis of all the sort of sports science type of things. We then had a series of scouts that got sent all around the world, came back with reports that Ange Postecoglou would green light, and then that was passed on to the money people to negotiate contracts and transfer fees, etc. So certainly under Ange Postecoglou, we had that sort of system. We didn't call it Jamestown Analytics, but it was the same sort of system of analysing data, analysing statistics, and then interacting with scouts and recruitment people and agents and so on, and then getting game footage of all those players for Ange Postecoglou and so on to watch. And then Ange Postecoglou would then green light the deals, and also Ange Postecoglou came with quite a lot of ideas, particularly about using Japanese and South Korean football, which he had a lot of experience from his 2 or 3 seasons across the Japanese league. It did feel like we kind of got away from that under Brendan Rodgers. He seemed to get rid of quite a lot of the things that had worked well under Postecoglou, brought in his own system, and then he was also part of bringing in Tinsdale, who, again, that was theoretically what Tinsdale was supposed to be very good at doing. Gary Simpson, you think Ange Postecoglou left because he wasn't being backed? Well, that might be true. We don't really know, but Ange Postecoglou did talk about when he left Celtic to go to Spurs, wanting to manage in a bigger, richer league than Scotland. So he had talked about the fact that going to manage in England in the English Premier League would mean he would be playing against some of the best teams in the world and some of the best teams in Europe, some of the best players in the world, week in, week out. And that wasn't the case in Scottish football, where he was playing against St Mirren, Kilmarnock, Livingston, St Johnstone, etc. For most of the weeks. So my understanding was that Postecoglou chose to go to Spurs simply to manage at a higher level against better players and better teams than he would be playing, remaining as the Celtic manager, where he would be having to go to Ross County or Inverness Cali Thistle or whomever. However, Clash went up to Celtic have been using Aldi analytics, keep buying mints. Well, as I say, in virtually everybody's transfer windows, there will be players that work out well, players that don't work out well, some players that you don't think are going to turn into really good players are remarkably good. If you think back to Ange Postecoglou's day, we got 3 players from Japan. None of them were particularly well known. Kyogo was probably better known than Daismaida Riahatati. They all turned into superstars for Celtic. We got Alsa Johnston, again, a name that not many of us would have heard of before. Matt O'Reilly came from first division football in England to Celtic for about £1.5 million. So clearly under Ange Postecoglou, our scouting system, our analytics, etc., was doing a good job, probably more often than not doing. But we did have some dud signings in Postecoglou's seasons. We definitely had more dud signings in Rodgers' 3 summer windows than we had in the 2 summer windows for Postecoglou. Good point. San Fran Celtic loans with options to buy have been good for Celtic. I think certainly it worked out really, really well. Obviously with Carter Vickers, it worked really, really well with Jota. Didn't work quite so well with Paulo Bernardo. But I do think it's something that Celtic probably should have done better, in that we would have got Adam Ida for a lot less. And I'm a wee bit disappointed that we didn't do similar with Arojo and Sriracha. Definitely with Arojo, I think Bournemouth probably would have been quite amenable to negotiating a transfer price for Arojo at the end of that transfer deal. Whether Arojo would have wanted to stay at Celtic at that point before he came to Celtic in the first place is another matter. Clashman Numpty, hope Inamura gets another chance. I like the look. I liked Inamura as well. I think the difficulty with Inamura was that he was kind of earmarked to be a centre back. I think Inamura is a better bet as a left centre back in a back three, or a left back, more conventional. Or I think he actually could step forward to be a defensive midfielder, because his quality of passing is very, very good, and he's actually a bit maybe like a near Beaton, a person who can play, or Tomoki Iwata for that matter, a player who can play as a makeshift centre back or a defensive midfielder, kind of a versatile player. He's reportedly had a very good season playing for Tokyo on loan in the J League. I think if I'm remembering rightly, San Fran Celtic, Inamura versus Lamine Yamal, one man's dream. I think that's what Rogers said. But the thing was, Inamura was only going to be playing against Lamal once, for one game in one season. He would be playing against the wide players for Falkirk and Kilmarnock and St Mirren and Livingston and stuff every other week. So him possibly, for a player with relatively limited first team experience in Japanese football, throwing him into playing against the best players in the world as an occasional game, when his bread and butter games would be against homegrown Scottish players and players playing for Scottish clubs for 90% of the time. So yep, San Fran Celtic, Inamura kept on passing the ball forward. My memory of Inamura pre-season, but the game against Livingston, was he was a pretty good defender. His passing was very good. He got himself forward. His crossing into the box was good. Wasn't the level of Kieran Tierney, not the level of Marcello Sriracha, but he's younger by far than both those players. Yep, Belfast Irish Celtic. Midas said to Inamura to fight for the jersey at Celtic next season. Hopefully it gives him the confidence and hunger. I'm hoping personally that both Inamura and Shin Yamada get a chance to get a second chance at Celtic. Shin Yamada had a difficult start to his loan spell in Germany. However, he scored quite a number of goals at the tail end of his season on loan in Germany. As I said, he had a really good record the season before he came to Celtic in the J League. He was one of the top scorers in the J League, which is not an easy thing to do. So I think there is a quality player there. I just think, like a lot of players coming from overseas, it can be difficult to settle into a new country, particularly where there's a language barrier. Quite right. San Fran Celtic, Yamada is faster than Maeda. Yamada has the record for the fastest player in the J League. He beat Daisen Maeda's record that he previously had held before. So Shin Yamada actually does have a lot of pace. He never really got a chance at Celtic to show that level of pace. And again, I think he was a player who maybe wasn't played in his best role for Celtic when he played for Celtic. Don't think, because he pretty much all of his games, most of his games were under Brendan Rodgers. He did get a few games under O'Neill and a few games under Nancy, but the bulk of his games were under Brendan Rodgers, and only Brendan Rodgers really thought of him, played him in his proper position. Good example, Belfast Irish Celt 32. Never got a chance at Celtic. He was much the same as Shin Yamada, although to be fair, did score quite a few goals for Celtic, but he never seemed to get into Brendan Rodgers' good books. We sold him to Genk. He big success in Belgian football. Then he got sold on to Turkey, been a big success there. He's probably going to be one of South Korea's first choice 2 strikers at the World Cup coming up. So Sanfan Celtic, yep, I think that also was part of the reason probably that Callum Osman didn't get a chance under Brendan Rodgers, but he did under Martin O'Neill. I think Osman could be a really good player for Celtic next season, and more so even the season after. I think if Shin Yamada can settle down into Scottish football, he could well be a very good player for Celtic as well, particularly if we use his talent for pace to get in behind. He is a player actually that Celtic could use as a wide player technically as well, a wee bit similar to Kyogo and Daisen Maida. He has got the ability to play as a wide player. Whether his crossing ability, etc., is good enough, I'm not so sure. But he certainly has got the pace and the ball control and intelligence to play as a wide player. If Celtic did want to try and convert him to be Daisen Maida, the way that Ange Postecoglou moved Daisen Maida more out to the left than he had been before. Really good point, Belfast Irish Celt. We tend to be quite critical of players based on their first 2 or 3 performances. Now, sometimes players don't get better and better. Good examples of that would be Joel Mvuka, who looked really scared and nervous and substandard both these games he played for Celtic. Mikel Onge-Balaquisha played something like 14 games for Celtic last season, scored no goals, did have 2 assists. He had occasional good signs, but 90% of what he did for Celtic last season was rubbish. So he didn't really confound the critics. But Nicholas Kuhn had a pretty dodgy first half to he came to Celtic in the January window, didn't play particularly well between January and May. However, his next season for Celtic, which was basically his one and only proper season for Celtic, he was absolutely brilliant. But it took him a few months to settle down, whether that was his physical fitness, whether that was changing team, changing tactics, changing culture, changing country, whether it was fitting in with his teammates. All these things are factors. And I think you are right. We do tend to maybe, I think all football fans, not just Celtic fans, but I think all football fans tend to be a bit overcritical of players and think they're either rubbish or they're good, when possibly players just need a bit of time to settle down. Clash by Numpty, Balaquisha makes Martin Hayes look a long-term investment. I think that's also a good example of the fact that over the last 50 years of me supporting Celtic, we've had some terrible signings and we've had some good signings. We've had some surprises. We've had a couple of players who no one particularly had heard of much of Lubomir Moravcik before he came to us. in the late 90s. He was a superstar for Celtic. Henrik Larsson, we knew about. He hadn't really been a superstar player in his time in Sweden or playing for Feyenoord. Came to Celtic and he turned into one of the best players in the world of that time. He's certainly one of the Celtic's greatest players of all time. But when he came to us from Feyenoord for £700,000, not everybody was convinced that he was going to turn into being a good player, never mind a superstar, brilliant player. So obviously, over the years, we've had some awful signings and some good signings and some surprise, super successful signings. And it's mostly is Miller getting us a game in Italy. So my understanding is that Lennon Miller hasn't been playing consistently in Italy, which might be the reason why he's not part of Scotland's World Cup squad, which was a bit of a surprise for me that he wasn't part of that squad, because I think he's a very high quality player, but I don't think he was getting regular first team football in Serie A. Yep, Paul Maguire. Balikwisha certainly is up there with on how he has been for Celtic so far. Is up there with one of the worst signings that Celtic's had in my time as a Celtic fan. He is reminiscent of the Brazilian centre back Rafael Scheidete, who probably is the worst Celtic signing of all time. £5 million, complete and utter total waste of money. But we've had lots and lots and lots of players over the years. Wyoming CSE Ryan Mominate was a big advocate of Balikwisha. That may be true. It's Ryan Mominate's was a channel I used to watch quite a bit, but I haven't watched that for maybe a couple of years. I kind of went off of what he was saying sometimes, and quite often went off. I didn't really like his tone of about certain players and stuff. San Fran Celtic, the only upside to Balikwisha has been me using him as a stick to beat Quinny with. Yep. On paper, Mikel Onge Balikwisha was a good signing for Celtic in that his stats had been very good. He had been part of the younger Belgium side, so he had been on the fringes of getting into the full international squad, but he'd been in under-21 squads with people like Raskin and Engels and similar players to that. So he was kind of thought for 3 or 4 years to be one of the next players to move into the Belgian full international squad. He seemed to get 2 or 3 bad injuries, and he's never seemed to be the same player again. Ernest Mosley, I think if Liam Miller was available for Celtic to sign him, I think he would be the answer to a lot of problems that Celtic have, in that he's a player who can play more as a defensive midfielder, he can play as a central midfielder, he can play even more as an attacking midfielder. I think he would answer a lot of Celtic's problems. I don't know, Belfast Irish Celt 32, Balikwisha as a 10 could work. Certainly that's where we sort of played in against Auchinleck Talbot, which I think is the last game he played for Celtic. After that, he kind of disappeared and was never seen again. I think he's been in training ever since. I think he has been in training for the whole of the second half of the season, alongside Mvuka and alongside Adamu, who hardly played. Mvuka played 2 games for Celtic. I think Balikwisha has played for 1 game for Celtic in 2026. Yes, so I didn't want to. So we were talking about Lennon Miller rather than Liam Miller. I think Liam Miller unfortunately died, if I'm right, in his 40s of cancer. Or maybe I'm mixing two players up. I'm pretty sure Liam Miller unfortunately died. Yeah. So I didn't want to correct about Liam Miller. Yeah, unfortunately, Liam Miller died at the age of 36 of cancer. So he also had a very a brief but very successful career at Celtic. Probably he would have been far better to stay at Celtic for his career rather than moving down south. And then after having moved down south, he never really settled, and he was kind of here, there, and everywhere. And then tragically died in his late 30s. So. Don't worry, Ernest. Mostly it's getting late at night or early in the morning. It's quite easy to mix up names. I mix up names all the time, which is quite often why I'm pausing to try and remember somebody's name or try and not mess things up. It's difficult. It's difficult keeping conversations going. Michael Ross Mulligan looks decent. Yep. Belfast Irish Celt rate Josh Mulligan. Think he should be in there for him before he goes to the Premier League and plays a blinder like McGinn. Yes, there's an argument. Certainly in the second half of the season, Mulligan didn't play very much because I think he had quite a lot of injuries second half of the season. So I don't know. There were rumours about Cammy Devlin coming to Celtic at one point. Rumours about about Leonard of also who's been on Mark Leonard, who was on loan at Hearts from Birmingham, coming to Celtic. Don't know whether either of those are going to prove to be true. Another name which I haven't properly looked into yet that's really been linked to Celtic is a chap called a 23-year-old Bosnian player called Benjamin Tahirovic, who's playing for Brøndby. In the past, Tahirovic has played both for Ajax in Holland and Roma in Italy. So obviously a player with quite a lot of pedigree as a younger player. He's been playing for Brøndby for about a season and a half. He, as I say, 23-year-old, he's going to be playing for Bosnia in the World Cup this summer, which might impact on his transfer coming to Celtic. But he seems to be a sort of proper defensive midfielder. Doesn't create an awful lot of goals, doesn't score a lot of goals, but is very good at breaking up play, very good at supporting the defence, linking up with teammates, very good at breaking up play, etc. So his numbers for goals and assists and chances created aren't tremendous, but he has got a very good reputation, and is said to be somebody that Celtic have been looking at previously in January and have been continuing to be looking at for this transfer window, and thought to be available for about £4 or £5 million. Whether he wants to come to Celtic's another matter. The other player that a lot of people have been talking about is Silas Anderson. However, he seems keener to go to Portugal than come to Scotland, because he did have options to come to Celtic and go to Rangers, but seems desperate to go to Portugal and rather than come to Celtic. Clashman, up to you. Do you think that Hearts and Motherwell can continue their upward trajectory next season based on their early losses? Answer to that question, Clashman Numpty, is no. I think Motherwell will drop from being a top 6 team to bottom 6 team, which has often been the case with Motherwell anyway over the last couple of decades. Is they tend to have a good season and a bad season, a good season, a bad season. I think they're probably going to miss quite a lot of their players are going to get moved on, and obviously they lost their manager Ascu. And as I say, I've not got an awful lot of faith in this Jamestown analytics that Hearts have got. And a lot of the players that Derek McInnes actually turned into the team that nearly won the title were actually players. About at least half to 2/3 of the squad he used were already at Hearts. He did add a few players like Claudio Braga, Kaziridas, the goalkeeper, Slow, their goalkeeper. But quite a lot of the players had been there at Hearts for 2 or 3 seasons, and he turned some players into even better players. But I'm not convinced that actually their scouting system, their analytical system, is that much caught, because their signings in the January window were pretty rubbish, all things considered. And even though our January window was pretty awful as well, we did at least get Julian Araujo for about 3 months, who was a superstar player for Celtic in those 3 months. So at least we did bring in a player who was a real difference maker, but unfortunately got himself injured before the end of the season. Anyway, so Wyoming CSC is going for France to win the World Cup. I don't really. San Francisco Celtic going for Japan, Argentina for Pat McLaughlin as the runners up, Brazil. So Pat McLaughlin going for Spain to win it and Argentina to be runners up. I think that's a pretty good bet. As I said earlier on, I think for one reason or another, Iran's got virtually the same chance of winning the World Cup as Scotland do, which is none. But it would be great as a Scotland international fan for 50-odd years as well, for Scotland to actually get through the group stage and get into the knockout stage. Even if it's just to the first knockout stage, that would be great for me. Ernest, mostly Morocco. A lot of people are putting forward Morocco as an outside bet. I think there's a lot of good reason to that as well. I think Morocco, being from North Africa, will be more used to the types of weather conditions that they'll encounter in the United States of America and in Mexico. So I think the heat and weather conditions and the extreme heat of playing in America and playing in Mexico in the summer, I think that's actually going to be a limiting factor for quite a number of quite a lot. So what was it? Yes, I think the weather conditions is going to be quite a limiting factor for quite a lot of the European countries and quite a lot of the countries who aren't used to playing in high heat. San Fran Celtic, I hope North Britain do well. So certainly so do I. North Britain being a name that was given to Scotland a long time ago. So Morocco being an outside bet is a definite possibility. I personally see them as a more likely bet than Brazil. But to be thoroughly honest, I've been kind of so taken up with the whole Celtic season. I haven't really been paying an awful lot of attention to anybody else apart from the Scotland qualifying games. I haven't really been paying much attention to the relative form of all the other countries who are going to be at the World Cup. Oops. 100% agree, Ernest. Mostly, I am Scottish, not British. Happy to be British when we're supporting British people at the Olympics or the World Championships for athletics or whatever. But in everything else, in sport or life, I'm Scottish rather than British. McLaughlin, Holland, Germany, Argentina, all these are good bets ordinarily. I do think personally, as I've said before, I think possibly the weather conditions might count against Holland and Germany, and obviously the weather conditions, the heat, etc., very much in the favour of, and very much in favour of Argentina. Clashman Numpty predicting Iran to beat America 7-1 in the final. It would be actually good fun to see Iran playing America during the World Cup and Iran winning. Iran obviously a pretty decent team to have got through Asian qualifying to get to the final stages. So anyway. Yes, Pat McLaughlin. I have. What will I say? Yes, I'm basing my thoughts more on science rather than past experiences at the World Cup 32 years ago. I do think actually in terms of many of the countries around the world. Have got strong. The Asian teams, the African teams, particularly, have got stronger and stronger. Don't think the European sides are stronger now than they were 32 years ago. Nor do I think the South American teams are relatively stronger now than they were 32 years ago. But I do think Asian football and African football has kept on getting better and better and better. My theory regarding which teams will do well at the World Cup is based more on physiology and medicine and science and the body's ability to cope at 80 degrees and 90 degrees and 100 degrees of high heat, and with dehydration and all the other factors that you get playing in the extreme heat of America and Mexico, etc., and as opposed to what happened in Qatar, where the heat was even higher. Those grounds all had air conditioning in the grounds, which meant the players were much more comfortable. The majority of the grounds they'll be playing in America and Mexico are really incredibly hot bowl grounds where the heat is actually amplified and magnified to be stronger and stronger. Women see we can't lose to Haiti, surely. Well, looking at the squad that Haiti are putting, or have sent to the World Cup, I think pretty much every single player in their side plays in European football, apart from a few that play in Major League Soccer. So they actually do have their squad actually does play at the highest level in France and Belgium and Portugal and so on. So they do actually have a lot of players playing in good top quality European leagues and a few players playing in Major League Soccer in America. So I think they actually are a relatively strong side. Yeah, so Belfast Celtic. So yes, Haiti have a side. They got through the Central American qualifying, which again isn't that easy. Although with Canada, America, and Mexico all being pre-qualified, it did mean the qualifying tournament wasn't quite as strong as it could have been before. However, if we think about the fact that Odsonne Edouard, who used to play for Celtic, was actually qualified to play for Haiti internationally, although he turned down the opportunity to do that, which was a bit of a surprise. But if they have other players roughly the same quality or near the quality of Odsonne Edouard, they do actually have a pretty strong side. Although the theory is that potentially with the fact that there are so many teams spread out all over America, Canada, and Mexico, and that probably if we do beat Haiti and winning one game in the group stage could be enough to qualify for the knockout stage. San Fran Celtic, I'd swap AJ for Arojo. I would. Alistair Johnston is one of my absolute favourite players, and I think him coming back into the Celtic side for the last 6 or 7 games massively improved the Celtic team. Now, at the same time, obviously, Arne Engels came back into the side, and players like McGregor and Iheanacho seemed to get a bit fitter, and obviously Maeda came back into form as well. So, however, I think Alistair Johnston is a very good player for Celtic, and I think the fact that we didn't have him for 80%, 90% of last season was a big factor on the pitch and off the pitch for Celtic not doing at all well. So for me, the ideal thing would be having both Arojo and having Johnston, because I think it would give us quite a bit of flexibility. Also might give us a bit of protection for Alistair Johnston not having to play every game for Celtic, because I think the drop-off between Johnston down to Ralston or Johnston down to Donovan is a very big gap. Anyway. Pat McLaughlin saying they've captured Wilson Isidore from Sunderland. Yeah, I think Haiti's actually got a good level of quality of players. They obviously have quite a lot of, because of the links between Haiti and France going back a couple of centuries. There actually are quite a lot of French players who have got parents and qualifications to be both dual nationals of Haiti and France. And as I say, Odsonne Edouard did have the option of being called up by Haiti, but he chose not to. And so I do think they actually do have, having had a wee look at the Haitian squad, they actually do have a lot of quality players from quality leagues. So, Yep. Pat McLaughlin, they got players all over. So they've got players in France, players in Switzerland, players in Belgium, some players in England, some players in America. So they are for me a stronger side than people are giving them credit for. Might be quite interesting to see how Scotland do in their 2 warm-up games prior to the World Cup, as it might actually give us a bit of a comparison, because Haiti have qualified, and then also Curacao, who were playing one of the friendly games. They're roughly the same quality of players, although Haiti is probably a bit stronger. Anyway, it's now practically 1 o'clock in the morning, so I think it's time for all of us to go to our beds. It's been, for me, a very, very nice, very good, well-spirited debate, discussion, talking about lots and lots of things. Apologies again for some rather not so nice comments that a few people got targeted with. I stayed clear of all those kind of comments for obvious reasons. So I apologise for those things being part of the comment sections. However, as I said, after giving the person 10-15 minutes to calm himself down, I did exclude him. So we'll call it a day, I think, there. Thank you very much, Pat McLaughlin, Feed the Bear, Clashman Numpty, San Fran Celtic, Belfast Irish, Michael Ross, everybody else. Thank you so much, YMCSC. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, Ernest, mostly. So thank you very much to everybody, as I say, and thank you to Lauren from earlier on. Thank you to Chipper67, all these people. Thank you to everyone who's contributed. Thank you to everyone for making this so much fun. Hail, hail, folks, from Michael Ross. Good night. And hail, hail from Clashman Numpty. Plan to do the same thing again next Thursday. So we can pencil into our diaries 9 o'clock next Thursday. I'm not away on my holidays for a couple more weeks after that. So we'll be doing again next Thursday. So thank you very much for everyone participating. Hopefully by next Thursday's live stream, we'll have a bit more certainty about who's going to be Celtic's manager. Thanks to you, Paul Maguire, as well. We'll have a bit more certainty who's going to be who's Celtic's manager. The story is early and middle of next week, we should have Desmond and the various different people having talks down in London as to who's going to be the Celtic manager. So, well, hopefully this time next week, next Thursday, we'll know for definite, and we can chat about that, or at least chat about what the most recent gossip is regarding managers, players coming and going, etc. And so until next Thursday, thank you, San Fran Celtic. Until next Thursday, goodbye and hail, hail.